Damn. Now we need another countdown.
Oh yeah, we need another countdown.
Talking
That's great. Yeah. This is the most professional start of a stream ever. Okay.
Just gotta give it a minute. I gotta hurry up and mine these blocks, man.
Okay. We're live. Hello guys, and welcome to the third annual PSP Homebrew Developer Conference. This year we're proud to have 10 presentations and welcome our viewers to stick with us through them.
Before we begin, whoa, what are you doing there, man? You're breaking my heart. Okay. Before we begin, it's important to state that this year we will only be answering 5 questions per project, asked only in the YouTube chat. If your question isn't addressed, you may try popping into the conference channel on the Discord server and ask there.
Right. So here's the current list of our presentations in order.
Prepare for trouble.
And make it double.
To protect the world from devastation.
To unite all peoples within our nation.
To denounce the evils of truth and love.
To extend our reach to the stars above.
Ian.
Nathan.
PSP HTC blasts off at the speed of light.
Surrender now or prepare to fight. Alright. The first presentation will be Tour of Light by ChaCheeChoo.
So do you guys have any jokes while we wait?
I'd like to share my horrors of my audio situation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's worth talking about. That I'm actually on my phone at the moment, not by choice, but because first off, I was having networking issues. The network card in my Mac was kind of like screaming at me, I guess. And then after a series of reboots and not much debugging, it decided it wants to cooperate. But the dollar store earbuds I bought specifically for this occasion decided they wanted to break 10 minutes before the conference. So here I am.
1984.
Really like that. Yeah, this is literally 1984.
We're ready.
Based in Japan, Yuri Taihan set out to develop the most balanced G ship they could. The YDH-01 was the result. While not the fastest on the grid, it is capable of handling just about anything the R4000 Geely calendar can throw at it. Though it lacks firepower, its shields are more than capable of withstanding the heavy artillery of other teams. After the self-destruction of the United States, survivors of the disaster either immigrated to Canada or kept their roots and moved to Alaska. This Alaskan team aims to continue its U.S. legacy in technological prowess. NECA Force's Honey Badger is a ship that places emphasis on reliability and durability. Due to lack of state-of-the-art technology, the team aims to dominate on weapon-centric events of the calendar. The main philosophy of this Italian team is making the most powerful ship they can, being able to overtake anyone and anything. The F-2035 is designed to be the pioneer in the speed department, reaching the highest speeds out of anyone on the grid and still managing to maintain decent handling. Though to do that, durability and firepower had to be greatly reduced. Owned by a British family with rich heritage in the racing scene, it's no surprise to see an English team participating in this league. Their MGP000 is the definition of agility, believing that our 4000 requires agility over anything else to perform efficiently. The drawback, however, was having the lowest top speed of any team in the league. The German engineering strikes again. As stated by the owner in an interview, if you can't beat them, kill them. The TDS-100 is a force to be reckoned with, having firepower that's very likely to ruin its target's day. In the weird relationship post the Finno-Chinese War, Finland in cooperation with China has created the lightest G ship in the league. It boasts quick acceleration and fastest recovery time from weapon hits. The Kimi 7 is by far the boldest design, having explored the side of racing no other team bothered with.
Anyway, look, I went on the internet this week and I found this.
All right, that's the presentation from ChaCheeChoo. They're currently in the Discord chat, so we'll be taking questions in YouTube.
Who needs gameplay?
Yeah, sorry, I expected that was the end because it was a black screen. My bad. Memory Hunter asks, is the source code available to see?
ChaCheeChoo? I can actually answer this one for him, I think, if he's not here to take the question. So, as far as I know, Tour of Light has... Oh, he is here?
Yeah, he's replying in the YouTube chat.
Oh,
so if you could just read those off.
Oh, okay. So, no, only engine. Yeah. There's a GitHub page up. It's pinned in his channel.
Okay, makes sense. Did you write your own engine? ChaCheeChoo says yes. Is there any relation between this and the PC Project Ballistic NG? No, but they are similar. I can't read Russian, so...
There's another question. When will the beta be released? The answer is when it's done.
Classic.
What is the projected goal for a full release date? I'm assuming that's also going to be when it's done. Yeah. All right. I think we've gotten enough questions for that.
Yeah. Of course, ChaCheeChoo will be around in his channel to answer any questions you might have after the conference.
All right, so for the next presentation, we will have me with Stardust-Celeste. I'm pretty sure. Yes. CrossCraft will be moved until after CMake. Alright, here we go, and welcome to my presentation here on Stardust-Celeste. So, the agenda is going to be about what's going on, what's new, and more of a general type of roadmap. So, to begin with, last year I committed to refreshing and reinvigorating Stardust Engine's codebase. I also dubbed it Celeste, so Stardust-Celeste is a combination of the name. And basically, here's the development story and how that really went. So what's going on? You know, guys, life sucks sometimes. I've had a lot going on in 2021. I got the coronavirus. That was fun. I worked more. At college got harder. But that hasn't really stopped me from working on developing things. But it has really slowed down the pace at which I was able to work. So let's get on to what about Stardust and how to Stardust. So there were a lot of issues I felt that there were in Stardust Engine. While I thought that the engine was coherent and you could use it to work on things, I also thought that after a while of using it over and over in different projects, I started to notice things that I wanted to change, and especially sort of structural things, and making it more friendly for other people to be able to use. So, one of the big ones is initialization. Stardust Classic has an issue with needing to know way too much information about the engine to even initialize. It makes it look scary, it makes it hard to get into, and it really doesn't make a lot of sense unless you really know what's going on. This is a small excerpt of the code here at the top for initialization. There's about another 10 lines outside of that as well that you would need to have in order to initialize. But even if you look inside of the main sort of function here, you're seeing that you're calling init platform, you're manually setting these logger levels, one of which is hidden within inside of a detailed namespace, so you wouldn't even know that that would exist, for example. And then you would have these checks for, is the current platform PSP, and then you'd have to do things like this. And then for every time you run this application, I've omitted some code here, but for every single time when you're interacting with your application, you're checking if it's running, you're running a platform update, then you're running your actual update, and you, as the end user, have to be responsible for main and stuff like that. So then you'd also have your cleanup code, and like some modules of Stardust weren't always being exited by the platform as a platform, so you needed to have the network driver to clean up itself. And that doesn't really make much sense. So the what ended up sort of happening was that basically you would get a lot of code that would be really hard to work with and especially maintain into the future. And Stardust-Celeste has really helped me with a lot of adjusting this structure, and this is the main sort of issue with the engine that I want to focus on, was restructuring in a way that made it a lot easier and nicer to work with. So at this sort of bottom here, this shows you a much smaller solution. It also makes the engine integrate and automate a lot of this boilerplate code, and it also assists with state management and update loops. And it kind of transitions the way you have to write the code. So, starting here, we have only one function, and it's not even called main. It's called core application, create new SC app. And all you gotta do is you gotta create an application config. You send that application config to the platform layer, and then you introduce a new object for your application. And basically, all you gotta do is you define your application as a class, and then you give it certain attributes for the on update, on enter sort of events. So everything turns into being more like event-based type code and more driven like this. It also allows you to have states and other things that aren't like explicitly being needed to be managed and created by the end user. Instead, the engine actually helps you with all of that initialization code and all of that clean transitions between two different states. And that is one of the most important things I thought about in the new design, is that everything should be automated by the engine when it's not within the best interest of the user to use it. For example, most of the time, you really don't care about much of the intricacies behind transitioning between two different states. Most of the time you're interested in just getting from one state to the other and not having to juggle a bunch of states on a stack and then managing that stack and how you use that. So really it makes way more sense that I would just define a state as an object and then say that these are the triggers for that state. Another one big point that I wanted to point out was documentation. Stardust Classic really had a lack of documentation, and that was kind of added in at the end. And the documentation, in my opinion, was not detailed enough, and it also did not basically tell you how something worked to the extent at which a user would need to know it. I mean, obviously, you don't want to explain to a user every single intricate detail about how your engine works, because that's not really in the context of what a client would read and be like, okay, I really did not need to know that. So that there's a line there that you have to draw. But then at the other end is being way too vague, and I felt that's how the documentation was. And basically, through it, I want to shed some light onto how it works, but I also want to have it be in such a way that the client can understand that. So Stardust-Celeste has much more documentation and also provides more depth and detail on what individual objects and functions do in the code. So for a general roadmap, development has been slow, but it's still ongoing, and it's actually used in CrossCraft, which will be presented later, as the main engine for handling all of the input, all of the graphics, everything that you pretty much see and experience. So, the future. Currently, Stardust is still in development, but this time it has a lot less to make up for than its predecessor. The predecessor's old code can be reused and reintegrated very easily into the engine, and it's just a matter of a little bit of time in order to do so. Currently, I would describe Stardust-Celeste as being in its pre-version 0.5 state from the old Stardust, and then basically we'll be working on continuing and fixing that back to what it once was. And the first release will be alongside the scripting library and the scripting execution engine for basic scripting and allowing a much easier entry than using just the C++ API. That will be release version 0.6, and I would slate it at being sometime this year. further releases would be building upon that support and also finally beginning work on creating a more suitable editor that would be basically using entity component systems in order to be able to really just have your application abstracted to the almost to the most that you can do so without having too much barrier to entry of the application itself. So with that, I think let's go ahead and go to the summary. Stardust-Celeste, while its progress may be slow, is still making its way forward into this new world. So thank you for listening to the presentation, and I will be answering questions. So it looks like there was one issue earlier about running Stardust-Celeste. So pretty much right now it's being automatically built by GitHub on the GitHub Actions platform in such a way that you can basically, if you're signed into a GitHub account, I think that's the one stipulation, that you would be able to download any of the builds. Currently it's just building as a static library. So currently, yeah, there is no editor, and that's planned for the future. Thank you. I'll also check Discord chats as well. Thank you. How can I support you? I have a link to my YouTube channel. Well, it's kind of like right here. If you want to subscribe, that's all you gotta do to support me. Is CrossCraft the only game in development with Stardust-Celeste? Currently, CrossCraft Classic is the only one with it, and CrossCraft in the future will probably still use Stardust. Would it be at all possible for there to be a tutorial or something to quick start for making something to render in the Stardust engine? Yeah, so currently Stardust isn't really in a state where I would say that it would be a good idea to make a tutorial, because a lot of the stuff would probably change in the future. But once it moves to being more stable, I would say that, yeah, I would probably make a tutorial series on that. How's the engine editor planned out, if any plans exist? So currently the way that I've looked at planning for an engine editor would probably be using ImGUI and using Stardust Engine itself as the base for the editor, if that makes any amount of sense. So for the editor, continuing on that, I would also probably say it would end up being functionally similar to others like Godot and Unity, for example, in terms of the look and feel and the style of editor. Is CrossCraft just a specially configured setup Stardust for MC? No. It's not. CrossCraft is actually a game. It isn't like a setup for an engine. Stardust is its own editor window. I think that's a question asking about the editor thing once again. So yeah, you would. So basically, my idea would be that the Stardust Engine editor would be self-hosted on top of Stardust Engine. It would not rely on anything other than components that it already uses. That would not mean that there wouldn't still be the C++ API in different forms. It would just be that the editor is built on top of Stardust. Okay. All right. I think we'll be getting ready to move on to our next presentation now. So the next presentation in order looks like ARK, A-R-K, a fresh modern CFW for the PSP and Vita by Acid Snake in the VC.
Beep.
I guess mic is not working.
Are you good, my friend?
I can do that.
Sweet. And then we can just come back around when he's ready and prepared.
Okay, let's do that then. Then I'll start sharing.
All right, I guess we're going to have a bit of a change in schedule. We're going to go to Wouter talking about CMake and SDL first.
Okay, then I'll get started. So, hello everyone, my name is Wouter, and today I will be sharing my game called Ocean Pop and why that's interesting and why why that's interesting for the people here at this conference. So this is what Ocean Pop is. It's a very simple match 3 game. You can move your shells as far horizontally or vertically as you would like. and you have a certain amount of moves in which you need to get a certain amount of points. It has a couple game modes. It's a lot of fun. So, why is this interesting here? Well, I managed to make this available for 4 different platforms, and it's all using the same code base. It's quite easy to port. So I have it for the Vita, but also for the PSP, Linux, Windows. So how did I do this? So I'm using C++ for this as a programming language. To build the code, I'm using CMake. And the important part here is that I'm using the SDL2 library, which I'll be explaining more about. What I do want to mention is that you can also use C instead of C++. That doesn't really make a difference. But let's get into SDL. So SDL is a library which can abstract a lot of things which are usually platform specific. So just tell SDL, create a window, or do something with the gamepad input, play a sound, draw something, things like that. And it handles that for you regardless of if you're on Linux or on a PSP or Vita, it just works. If you're using SDL, there's also some additional libraries you can use. Like you can use SDL Mixer for audio, SDL TTF for font drawing, and SDL Image if you want to use PNG or JPEG. But that is not what we're on about right now. Wait. So I'm going to be explaining how I use SDL, or how to use SDL in general, using a small example I made, it's a very simple, it's just a white background. It shows a red square, and if you close the window or you press start, it closes. So first you have to initialize SDL. Here I use SDL init with the I want video and game controller support, but there's some additional systems you can enable. And to create a basic window, I title it window and use the resolution of the PSP, and then a renderer to which we can draw things. So then the actual rendering, first we clear the renderer, we create a simple square or a rectangle, and then we actually set the color to red and we draw it to the render. Then we change the color to white again, so we get a white background, and we render everything that's in the renderer. And that's it. Now we have a red square on the screen. One more thing, to respond to input, you go, you poll for events. And in case of SDL quit, which means someone closed the window, we set running to 0. If a controller is connected, we just enable it. And if we press start on the controller, we also stop running. So it's very simple. Using controllers is very simple. That's also how the PSP input system works with SDL. Now, how do we build this? We use CMake for this. Good thing about CMake is you make one file called cmakelists.txt, and you can use it for all the platforms you support. So I'll go over this a little bit, but CMake in general you'll have to look into if you want all the details or just ask later. But first you set your project name, what the executable you want should be called and which files it should compile. Then here, this is important. We use package config to find out if SDL is there, to set some variables. These we use in, so here we add the SDL2 include directory, and we link to all the SDL2 libraries. That means also the dependencies in this case, which is very useful. And then to actually do the building, once we have this file, we create a build directory, we go to it, we just run cmake ... and we run make. And there we have it, our Linux application. But we kind of also want this to work on the PSP. So now I'll go over how we do that. And you remember this CMake file? Well, we're going to add something to it at the bottom of it. And that would be this. So we can just check, like, are we building for PSP? Then we add this, which we link to SDL2 main, which allows us to not write any PSP specific code at all, and it would still work. And with this function, we just create an eboot file, and we just give it a title. We don't set any of the images. That's so the PSP can start it. And that's it. Then we just build it. Now, instead of CMake, we use PSP CMake, which, yeah, and that's all there is to it. Then we have our PSP game. And it's the exact same code. We didn't make any changes. We just changed the build file. And that's it. Some additional tips if you're planning on doing this, or if you're planning on porting a game, it's useful to know that you can also make your game work on official firmwares, so PSPs which have not been modified. Then you need to use set the build PRX flag and enc PRX flags in PSP CMake, and that's all you have to change. Then it works in official firmware. You get a little bit bigger of an eboot, but that's all there is to it. And if you want to run PSP specific code, then, for instance, I took this example out of OceanPop. For the PSP version, I use OGG for the music, and for all other versions, I use MP3. So I just use an ifdef statement, __ PSP __. Then we use OGG, everyone else MP3. So that's good to know. And that's all there is to it to know if you want to make a cross-platform or multi-platform app. So here's an example. I have OceanPop running on the PSP. You can also download this. It's available. I made the first release a while back. So if you want to get it, you can go to sharkwouter.github.io/OceanPop. And the code I'm using for this presentation, you can also find on my GitHub. And STL has this own website and is well documented. But if you have any questions, you can write on the Discord channel, SDL, or on dev. You can write me directly. This is my Discord name, and I use this weird Mewtwo image, so you'll be able to find me. I do want to thank a couple of people. These are all people who are in this Discord who've made either changes to SDL or changes to the PSP Dev Toolchain, which allowed me to release OceanPop on day one on the PSP as well. So thank you very much, guys. And that's it for me. If you have any questions, you can either ask them now in the chat, or you can ask later. Just use one of the Discord channels or write me directly on Discord. So thanks for listening. Any questions rolling in yet? Probably not. YouTube is a little bit behind.
Yeah, there's a few coming in.
That is a little bit difficult because for multiplayer you would want to do networking, and the PSP is not the best platform for that. And we didn't port so there's a helper library for SDL which allows you to do networking. It's called SDLNet, and we didn't port that because nobody asked. So if there's real interest for this, we might consider this. Otherwise, at the moment, it's a bit difficult.
Okay. Let's see. There was also one up here. Is this Bejeweled?
It's sort of Bejeweled, but you can move your gems a little bit further.
Okay.
So that makes it more interesting, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But you can try it out.
There's another question by Daniel Zalega. Why not find package SDL2 config required directly? I'm assuming it's referring to your CMake.
Yes, I get that. So maybe I can go back to it. So there's actually a very simple reason for it. Yeah, here. So if we use just find package CMake, then on the PSP it doesn't find all the required libraries. So you'll have to link to all the PSP specific libraries manually. The package config actually knows all of this. So it's just easier.
Yeah, that makes sense. I need to translate this comment then. All right, it looks like doesn't seem like there's going to be any more questions.
Okay. If there's any further questions, just write on the Discord later. That's no problem.
Yep. Thank you for presenting today.
You're welcome.
All right. Do we know if Acid Snake is back?
Let me check. Yeah, a few minutes ago I was having trouble with the mic. Let's try again after this presentation. So it looks like they're ready. So if you want to go ahead and take the wheel there. There he goes.
Looks like he'll be reconnecting. If we can't get Erique, it'll probably be after the next presentation, I assume, then. Well, we're at there's another question from chat, I guess. Isn't it possible to port some parts of OpenGL like on the Vita with VitaGL? So there is a project called PSPGL, which is essentially I would call it like a GLES sort of binding layer. That's what it claims to be. It says it's a GLES like library, and it does cover like some of the GLES standard. Some people do use it, but I haven't really seen it be that prominent.
Yeah, they're deafened now, so I'm not really sure what's going on.
Okay, we'll go to the next presentation. So we'll do CrossCraft Classic, if I recall correctly. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Let me pull that up really quick. All right. Oh, the chat's showing. Oops. There we go. Okay, am I live on both sides? Cool. All right, so here is the presentation then on CrossCraft Classic. So, CrossCraft Classic is a collaboration project between me, MotoLegacy, and RegenStudio. Regen isn't here right now. And MotoLegacy is having some of the audio issues. So, CrossCraft Classic is essentially a recreation of the OG Minecraft Classic, which you can still go and play, by the way, with a modern JavaScript recreation on classic.minecraft.net. CrossCraft Classic is built on Stardust-Celeste, and it is and will be a collaborative effort between me, MotoLegacy, and RegenStudio. On the left here is like a sort of JPEG'd out looking screenshot of the actual game of CrossCraft Classic. As you can notice, it has lighting, it has clouds, and it has a little bit of fog in the distance, actually, with this sort of classic looking terrain generation. So this is what our recreation looks like. This is running under Linux for this screenshot. We have water down in the bottom right. We have trees looking like normal trees. We also have flowers growing out as well. And if you notice underneath these trees, it has shadows. So we also do have a basic lighting system in place. If you look at the features, CrossCraft Classic is using the Unity texture pack from Minecraft alongside modifications made by MotoLegacy. These textures are CC0, I believe, and available for free use in open source projects. CrossCraft Classic currently enables flying with no clip, has block placement and destruction as well. It will feature all 37 Minecraft Classic blocks. That includes the variants of wood, not the variants of wood, the variants of wool, the different types of flowers, there's the sapling, and then all of these sort of ores and world-based materials. It currently has transparency support, as you saw in the last screenshot, and also supports cross-plane rendering, which is basically for when the flowers render, basically it shows on... it's that sort of X-shaped rendering for blocks. And then more features. CrossCraft Classic currently runs on Windows, Linux, and PSP 1000 models, and since it runs on PSP 1000 models, it will also run on all the higher models, so 2000, 3000, the Go, and then all of the other variants of that. The world itself generates in under 30 milliseconds, so literally a blink of an eye. The chunk meshes themselves take up less than 1 megabytes, and there's that's on average, and then the maximum worst cases, I believe, is like 1.8, and that will be reduced down to like worst case being like half a megabyte, I believe, with a couple more optimizations. It does have infinite scrolling clouds, and you can also go around in the world, and the clouds do not follow you. It currently has 256 by 256 by 64 worlds. Basically, that's the size of the normal preset when you create a Minecraft Classic world. We could go for the larger one, which is 512 by 512, but it wouldn't work on the 1000 models, because Classic right now is just using static world storage. It would also not be that hard to go ahead and add more. It has its own original terrain generator, and this generator was something I actually broke down on my Iridescence channel, working on testing out different noise generation algorithms, libraries, and creating biome maps and rivers and things like that. And we were able to have pretty good results for large maps at a very swift speed. We also have water physics, which is running, so basically whenever you update a block near water, the water will flow into those blocks correctly, based on the space that needs to be filled. It doesn't look perfect, but it runs correctly, and it does the correct behavior. We also have chunk updates, and what I mean by this is that if you have a dirt block and it is exposed to sunlight, it will turn into grass. If you have a grass block that is no longer exposed to sunlight, it turns into dirt. Stuff like that basically happens as well. So, what's really left in our CrossCraft Classic implementation here is pretty much just doing some block selection and having a UI for that as well. And then also just completing out player physics so that you can also have a model where the player can walk around the world, sort of like semi-survival type of physics. And that's really all that's left for getting CrossCraft Classic out to the masses. So when will it be released? CrossCraft Classic is probably set to be released by the end of Q2 2022, so that would be until, I believe, end of June. But likely it would probably be able to be done by mid to late April, by the latest. It's only a little bit that needs to be added in the next couple of weeks. So, are there any future CrossCraft projects in view? Some of them, I thought, would be pretty simple. CrossCraft Survival Test, if you're familiar with how Minecraft Survival Test works, was literally you just added mobs and hearts, and then, like, I believe you added, like, bows and arrows as well, and combat into, essentially, Minecraft Classic type world. And then you were scored based upon how many mobs you were able to kill, or how long you were able to survive. I forget exactly which one it is. And then there's more classic versions like CrossCraft InDev, which would probably be more like a Lamecraft style looking thing, where you would have a fixed size world and then you would have crafting, and then past that phase it would probably go into infinite development and working on infinite worlds and how that stuff works, now that you have a baseline of basic mechanics. And then for InfDev you would start to move more into an alpha sort of stage of development. So, any questions?
Me.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I got the question about did you you make this project based on a specific version of Minecraft Classic?
Specifically the one that you can access in your web browser on Classic Minecraft Net.
Oh,
I think
that
that's
one was released
0.30, I think, or something like that.
So that uses a classic protocol, so you can basically play multiplayer on the old Java Minecraft Classic, right?
Yes, that version does, but that is not set up for our project, if that's what you're asking.
Oh, will be possible to connect players from, for example, ClassicCube and this project who can play on the same server?
From what? I'm sorry.
The ClassicCube. Do you know the project ClassicCube?
No, I don't.
Well, it's just like a new life to the Minecraft Classic. It was released in 2013. It's still alive, and it kind of uses the old Minecraft protocol. So it's like it's like a new client. You can connect to all those old servers and play with them together.
All right, I didn't know that. I guess I'll look into that. Although I don't think we're really planning on doing much of the networking features until probably something like a beta or something like that.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, I'll look at YouTube questions now. All right, so how does camera control work? Does it use the face buttons? Currently is using the... Yes, I believe currently using the cross, the circle, the square, and the triangle. That's currently the control scheme for now. Let's see. Is it possible to realize an infinite survival world? So is it possible to have an infinite world? Yes, definitely it is possible. And how well would the PSP be able to handle an infinite world? So currently the tests that I was able to do, simulating chunk filling and generation, which I did in a series called Advent of PSP, came out with a final result of taking 180 milliseconds to fully generate... it took 180 milliseconds on only one core to generate essentially a 256 by 256 area, and then that ended up becoming... That's 16 by 16 chunks, so that's 256 chunks. But that ended up having that each chunk did not take that much time in order to fully generate, and that was with biomes and with... what's it called? That was with biomes, and that was with rivers enabled as well. It also used more expensive of height map based biome selection, so certain areas would basically be ocean, and other areas would be more mountainous based on what the actual height map of the world pre-generated would be. Pre-generated just meaning generated before the selection of individual biomes. So that took 180 milliseconds on one core, and I was able to actually have full parallelism with the ME, and that reduced it to being basically literally half the time. It ended up being like 80 or 90 milliseconds or something for being able to do a 16 by 16 chunk area. So given that I mean, the simulation there isn't perfect, obviously, but given that it only took that much time, I think it would be very possible to generate worlds on the fly. I think the actual biggest issue is generating the meshes, or generating essentially the graphics to draw on the screen for that. Okay, You said this will be compatible with all. This includes the E1004 Street model as well. Yes, it would be because it's compatible with all the 1000 models, as far as I'm aware. Obviously, we encourage testing. You can currently download them from the GitHub page on CrossCraft Classic. You can basically download the PSP version, Windows, and Linux versions, and bug tests would be appreciated. It was described more like a Minecraft engine. Yeah, that's. I think that's a fair way of describing it. It's more so. It's not really. Yeah, it's more like developing a game, but the base engine of the game is important as well. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily as a engine itself. I would classify it as being a set of features as part of a game, and that could be easily and openly modified to be your own. So you could create your own sort of game. Is there a texture pack switching feature? No, you have to modify the index file. Will there be a day and night cycle? Yes, there will be. That's not too hard to add. But not for Classic. That would be... I think that might be a survival test or in-dev sort of thing. How many threads does the PSP really have? So it has two MIPS R4000 processors, the main game engine and then the media engine, and then you can use these as like two threads, right? They're not really like two threads, it's more like two CPUs that you're trying to coordinate to work together. So it's not really a thread, but yes, you have essentially two processors. Alright, I think that's enough for questions. My voice is dying really bad. Alright, so are we going to move to Arc now?
We'll certainly try.
Yes, indeed, everyone is a lazy developer.
Yeah, we can see hearing, but
Hello, can you hear me?
oh yes, hello.
Sorry.
I think we could probably move on to Suicide Barbie. Give me 1 second to get you up.
I don't know. I hope my mic works.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, good. Can you see my presentation? Okay. Hello, everyone. So let's talk about the Suicide Barbie today. I'm Ronaldos, also known as Ray, and I'm going to talk about the demo that we, with the team at the Black Lotus TBL, we made it. We made the demo for PSP back in 2007. So why would it be interesting now? Mostly because we released the source code last year, so you can try it out, compile it yourself, and maybe modify it a little bit. So this is kind of the first screen on the Suicide Barbie that you see the logo, and the demo itself. It was shown in Brickpoint Demo Party in 2007 in the Wild Demo competition, which accepts the consoles and handheld devices. And we took the first place back then. Then we got a Public Choice Nominee Awards at the Scene.org Awards. It's pretty good for a demo. And I think it's pretty good for the PlayStation Portable demo. The Poetnet, we got it became quite popular, and it got a little bit controversial around it. Partially because we wanted to create controversy, but partially because of the audio track that we used. It was probably the first audio track for the demo that had a singing voice in it, and we of course ran into some problems with licensing. So we released the demo on GitHub last year, and you can check it out yourself. So I will talk a little bit about the story of the how we started with the Suicide Barbie. So really, it all started with reverse engineering PSP itself, the graphics of the trying to understand the GPU of the PSP, and helping the Homebrew SDK community to make small code samples. On the other hand, the group, the TBL itself, the Black Lotus, made several quite successful Amiga demos in the past. I think that the group is mostly known about the Amiga demos. So after the successful demos from the TBL, the Starstruck demo, and the team decided for the new challenges, and we're looking for the new platform. And PSP was kind of nice. It was a small version of the PlayStation. It was a very powerful in a way. You can hold it in your hand, and it was a limited platform as well, fixed platform, not like PC. It was more a little bit like Amiga, but much faster and much more powerful. I don't know, for some way our art director thought that this logo for the PSP would be funny, so we used that in the demo. So back in 2006, when we started working on the demo, there were no PSP emulators at all. So we had to basically do the cross-platform solution for it. So the demo would run both on the PC in the DirectX 9, and we used the Visual Studio 2005 to make it, and at the same time it would cross-compile to the PlayStation Portable. So most of the time we would spend on the PC. Actually, we would try the scenes. Our artists would work on the PC, and then we would pretty much knew that we are going to get the same results on the PlayStation Portable. So we used the demo itself made 100% on our Homebrew SDK. The official SDKs or official hardware was never, kind of dev kits were never used for that. Neither we ever used the documentation from the real dev kit. It was always only reverse engineered information or documentation from the Homebrew SDK. So we use the PSP Toolchain approximately you can still use it from 2006 if you want to compile. You have to use that old Toolchain actually. And the huge help was PSP Link that allowed us to connect the device to PC and be able to stream the data back and forth. That was extremely helpful during the development of the demo, so that we could change things quite fast and see the results. So for this demo specifically, we wanted to develop a new data pipeline, and it was heavily art direction kind of. The demo itself was very driven by the art direction, and we wanted the pipeline to be less driven by the code, but more driven by the data itself. So most of the scenes you see in the demo, they are animated in the 3D tools and then exported as an FDX. Then on top of that, we have a small Lua scene description files that they look like that approximately. They allow to assign for every object certain shader or certain alpha blending states. Allows to pass certain information into the effects. And the effects themselves, they basically know how to render parts of the scenes and how to interpret those parameters. On top of that, we kind of have a very simplified batch process that bakes all the scenes. You can see they basically go scene by scene, that bake your script, and it produces a platform-specific data. We can produce a DirectX 9 specific data or PlayStation Portable specific data. And the demo supports a bunch of special effects. Most thing that you probably will notice, it's a bloom and environment mapping. And there is a lot of alpha blending. So we used only a little bit of the VFPU. It's a special vector processor inside the PSP, and we wrote a little bit of assembly code specifically for it. Mostly it is used for the vertex skinning, for the animations of the characters, but I tried it a little bit to make some other effects using assembly to speed them up. For instance, I experimented with the blur to actually do the blur, full screen blur on the CPU. However, in the end, it didn't run as fast. It was actually running quite fast, almost as fast as doing it on the GPU, but the maintenance of the code was killing it a little bit. Sometimes people are quite surprised. Why would the bloom or blur on the CPU? Why would it be comparatively fast GPU? Actually, mostly because we could run. The CPU is not doing that much, so it's mostly free. So by overlapping both GPU and CPU work, it kind of could be utilized for the bloom. It's a small function that we use for the skinning. To glue everything together, we used plain C code, and a couple of interesting things we could the scrub for the demo that as well helped tremendously for the art direction of the demo, that we could scrub back and forth for the demo time and jump from scene to scene and quickly see how the transitions work. Artists really love that part. We had to kill it like in the last week before we shipped the demo, mostly because we integrated streaming into the demo. So I'll show a couple of crazy photos from the development time. That is a couple of days before the release. You can see most of the team hard at work. We actually rented a hotel room to be all together and work on the demo. This is how the development looks like. Most of the development happened on the laptops, and then it was we usually would deploy to PSP and just check it out on the device. This is how the art direction looked like. You can see the art directors standing and kind of projecting their art into the mirror, into the heads of mirror programmers, and you can see the programmers hard at work. Yeah, you can see this is the last day before the submission of the demo for the demo party. You can see a bit of a stress in our faces. And actually here, you can see the chip. Actually, the guy who's sitting the farthest away, it's Chip. He's the person who started the reverse engineering of the graphics of the PSP, and he did quite a tremendous job at understanding how the GPU works and making the samples for the Homebrew SDK. And that's the full team. And if I have a little bit of time, I can quickly show some of the scenes. Sorry, it's from YouTube, but that's probably the fastest way to show it. And you can see this is the logo of the TBO. The first time it was animated, I'm sorry. The demos before were always with a static logo of the TBO, and that was the first one. So most of the scenes that you can see, they are just a bunch of animated geometry. Mostly it's heavily, comparatively heavily skinned animations. The skeletons driving the animations of the character of the meshes. You can see most of the scenes, they actually overlap. Usually we would run two scenes in parallel, and so most of the scenes actually had to run quite fast, even with the other scene overlapped. The effect that you just saw, it was a sprites that are spawned on the positions of the vertices in the mesh. And usually we would have one heavy scene and then a bit lighter scene in the middle for the performance. Here as well, you can see that there's a lot of bloom, a lot of blooming, and the scenes kind of go from one to another. And you can see a mirror effect here. It's just a projection of the same scene rendered from the slightly different angle inside the mirror. Yeah, as I said, most of the bloom, it's a free passes, full screen, blurring, and just additively added on top of the image. And some effects were hand animated, like here, the letters, there is a small code that does this animation. Yeah. And animations like that on the characters, for instance, we did a lot of the gradients. The artist would paint the gradients in the textures, and then we would just increase the alpha value. So it would create this kind of simple animations. And that this scenes, of course, created quite some controversy for this demo. But you can compile your demo and you can see it on YouTube, or you can download the source and take it from GitHub, compile it yourself, and run it on the PSP. Yeah, I think that's it. Wow. Are there any questions?
I got a question.
Yes, please.
Okay, so how is that related to this? You hear it?
Seems like you cut out or something.
Ah, never mind.
So I'll just look at the questions in the. Yeah, can we get a link for the demo? Yes. Yes, I'll just paste it afterwards in the channel.
Did you think about recompiling it with the current toolchain?
We tried, but we ran into several problems. Actually, the part of the problem is that we couldn't get the binary as small as it used to be, so we couldn't fit it. So Erique, he's not today. He couldn't make it for the presentation today, but he's still trying to get it with the latest toolchain.
Oh, that's
hopefully
nice.
It will happen at some point.
Okay.
But it compiles. It's just that the binary is just too big.
Not as small as you want it. Yeah.
Yes, because the everything was really tightly kind of packed to get things running. So we there is not that many bytes left, kind
of. I guess this is a more general question from Alexei. Do people have an easy and available way to make their own 3D games like some of the big studios for PSP? And I think this would be a really apt question for you.
Yeah, I don't think there is an easy way. And today there were like presentations of several engines that could be used. But honestly, I mean, I actually work at Unity, and many of the several guys that worked on this demo later we went to and worked on Unity, and we actually made iPhone and Android ports for Unity. But
wow, that's
as
fantastic.
A joke, as a joke, we were joking if it's possible to do it in PSP. So I don't think so. At least Unity is not is too heavy for that. But later on, for PSP Vita, yes, we had, for instance, Unity at some point deploying to PSP Vita, but not PSP. I think that is a bit too small, kind of. The platform is not enough. The restrictions are quite heavy on that platform.
All right, that sounds good.
I think I won't get caught again, but okay. How is this related to this?
Jump in. I'm a Barbie girl in the Barbie world. Life in plastic. It's fantastic.
So, probably not related to this directly, but the demo itself was inspired by the Barbie suicide. It was it's an artist who's taking the dolls, Barbie dolls, and he was creating like installations of Barbies being killed, like the toy Barbies being killed in various ways. And that was actually some of the scenes in the demos they look somewhat like what he was doing. So it's inspired by the actual artist kind of doing this strange installations with Barbie dolls.
Yeah, I can see the work where it was like very exciting.
And there was another the sound the music in the demo. It's actually the song of the Swedish artist. The team is mostly Swedish actually that worked on the demo. So that song inspired quite a lot of this demo. Just by the art director was really in love with that music tune. So and then basically we went and remixed that song of hers, and that's the soundtrack in this demo is a remix of that artist, and then the music. I can as well paste the link to the artist, to the musician. Sorry.
All right. It looks like yeah, it looks like there's no more questions. Thank you for presenting today.
Well, there is a lot of questions, but I don't think they are connected with the demo. Thank you.
All right, so let's go ahead and see what's next. I think we have Josh Jenney with Reformation Day. So if you want,
all right.
Yeah, so if you want to get ready.
Well, let's go ahead and we'll get started. My name is Joshua Jenney. Let me go and put this on video so you can see who we are and what we look like.
Hello.
My name is Joshua, and this is my wife, Deborah.
Hi.
We helped build like a video game for Reformation Day, October 31st, 1517. And we got a chance to do this by hearing about the PSP homebrew development that was going on. There was the PSP Awakening that was being pushed out and said, hey, we got this homebrew developer conference going on. There's these game jams happening for the PSP. And when I heard about it, I was like, wow, this is great. We should totally get into this. So just want to start off by saying thanks for everybody for making these things possible. Greetings to the viewers of the PSP Homebrew Development Conference, those that are involved with the PSP development itself, and just making this an awesome community to be a part of. We're from JennyGames.com. We make video games here and there, and we have this on itch platforms. You can find us there. So yeah, let's talk about some of the backstory for how this video game came up. We started with we found out of PSP Homebrew Halloween Game Jam, and we thought, I have to go and make this game. I want to figure out how to take this as an opportunity to get into programming, get involved into writing up a video game for the PSP because I love playing the games and I like the whole platform that you can create stuff on. And so I just felt like I really wanted to do this. So this is going to be the first time creating a title for a PSP game. And so for the month leading up to the event, I started studying the SDK kit that was provided on the GitHub and started to get it, tried out the examples, learned how to build them, and even try to figure out how, debugging wise, how it works and how you can put it to use. But yeah, the theme for the game was Halloween, like Halloween.
Well, we kind of felt like everybody was going to be doing like zombie shooters, and we had this thought to do something really different from the thing, but still like technically on Halloween. And so we remembered that Reformation Day is October 31st also, and it's I guess it's something that probably a lot of people who, I don't know, probably not a lot of people watching or listening really know a lot about it, but it's a very historic event that led to centuries of religious, cultural, economic reform, and probably a few centuries of warfare also. So, and it just started with this one dude, Martin Luther, who was basically just a scribe. He was kind of like, I don't know, I think of him kind of like as like a code monkey of the time. And he did some reading. It inspired him a little bit, and he wanted to have a discussion in basically an open forum. And the powers that be at the time said, no, sit down, shut up.
We don't talk about stuff.
Yeah, we don't talk about this. And I mean, and then yeah, you had this huge split in what was the Catholic Church at the time in Germany. It spread like wildfire through Europe. And again, this is 1517. This is way before the internet, and it just affected a lot of people. It temporarily, it really, like, the guy's life was never the same. He was excommunicated. They threatened to kill him. They just, I mean, they wanted him to take back everything he said. And it was just, at the time we were looking at this game jam, it was 2020, right? Yep. October 2020. Or was it 2019? 2020. Yeah, October 2020. So you think about where you were October 2020 at the time of that game jam, and it was like the world was like on fire with just crazy junk. And the more I read about Reformation Day and what was going on with this one guy, he was kind of a nobody. It kind of resonated with
the times.
Yeah, with the times. Like we saw, I think, the censorship that is possible online through social media platforms and mass media, and just kind of like this whole like media technology industrial complex kind of, I don't know, it just seemed like it became so apparent. And then I read about Martin Luther in 1517 and his ideas.
All right,
hold on.
But as you can see, we've been working on trying to figure out how to take this concept and make it work so that kids can use this. Something that would allow folks to take an idea that was unusual and different and be able to talk about it, being able to share and just even have just discussions about things that might have not been popular or held in, would be, culture canceled or whatever. So this game kind of had a lot of parallels to stuff that's going on. And we figured, you know what, let's go ahead and go with this. You have this Martin Luther character who's able to do something that was very different. I felt connected to this idea that you can have kind of go outside of what's norm and put yourself out there and take a chance. And I just really connected with that. So we went ahead and decided to go with this unique theme where the game would stand out. We knew that just with the concept itself would have a strong art base, music, being able to write a story ourselves that could connect with historical events and character in a game. It just kind of felt like a natural fit. So tying these different things together, we decided to create what's called a visual novel engine. I know it's been marketed and showcased as being a demo, but it's a script engine designed to run things at runtime. The script to run a story, to load the images, the resources, the music, all of it, so that it's not been hard-coded into the code. It's dynamically loaded at runtime so that when you run this on the PSP, it actually loads the images and the music and the script line by line. And so it was a lot of fun to start working on putting this stuff together. The biggest thing I wanted in this was trying to figure out how to work out the time management, because as you know, coming up with a video game takes time. And with a game jam, it felt like a perfect fit for me. Nice compressed amount of time, limited amount of hours you can work on a project. And so I spent the first month learning about the PSP SDK kit, learning how to do those things, and then allocated just that week for doing the game engine, which most people didn't have to do. They could have built the engine through the rest of the week, but the game assets and everything should have been like during that week. They had the whole month to do the engine. But I was like, no, I wanted a personal challenge to make this work. So I made it hard for myself. And I did it, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So I started working on it. 5 days into it, I still didn't have an engine. 2 days left, I was like, okay, I'm in serious trouble here. And I'm like, okay, I need time to work out this engine. I hadn't even started working on the assets, the music, even the script. And I was like, oh my God, I need help with this. I wanted something where to take this engine and try out with a story, something that would have some sort of like an eternal value to it, something that would have a meaning and a purpose, because most of the stuff that we go through in life has been like, why is this happening to me? Why are these hard things happening? And I wanted this to be like the first game using this engine to be focused on that purpose of like taking a risk and going out there and developing that relationship with God. So, yeah. So I was like, God, I need some help with this. I asked Deborah to help me out with trying to create all the assets and the graphics and stuff. So we went ahead and we got it going. So this was the night before the deadline. Deborah went ahead and started working on the graphics and the assets, creating up the script. I was able to test all this stuff about 11 o'clock the night before everything was done with the basic hello world with the script and the sample image. And I have to tell you, after working on this for days and days, with just looking at the plain text, working in the coding environments, and actually being able to see something visual, it was beautiful. It made me cry. And so we just went through, just working on the next few hours to complete all this stuff. So from 11 to 3 into the morning, Deborah was able to get the script put together. She was able to get the art assets together, and we got it plugged in. We started testing it. And so by 3 to 4, we finished up all the actual game engine, the testing, and we knew we needed some audio. So we decided to spend some time to figure out how to get audio working in the game. So it's not just this kind of visual novel engine thing. So we figured out how to get some MP3 audio plugged in there. We set it as a loop, and by 5 o'clock, it finished. We submitted it, and then I went to work at 7 a.m. So 2 hours later, got some sleep, went back to work. But I was on a programming high, excited to see this thing come together. Really glad to be able to do these things. So yeah, I wanted to figure out how to take this code and make this work, not only during the development of this process, but also how to kind of document the process of how this stuff would come together. So after starting off in the beginning with the SDK kit, I started off with a hello world, 2 scripts. One was just to say hello world on the PSP screen, and another one to test out working with strings. Did that. The next 3 programming examples were focused on the game loop engine, like how to do like the button displays on the screen, how to exit the game loop. Then the next one was working on the fonts, the text position on the screen, and eventually into the images that would show up on the screen itself. So after getting some of the basic SDK understanding of how to use some of this code, I went over to wololo.com and looked at their talk forums to kind of learn how to start figuring out how to get large images on there, how to take some of the what's considered boiler code for the callback functions, the frame buffer, the graphics, the VRAM, pushing them off as separate external headers and C code, and import those in to the main during the compilation. So we did that, got multiple MPGs with the transparencies tested, and we got that working. The first test crashes, so we were kind of learning how to make that thing work. And eventually we got to the point where we had a working game loop, PNG's layers with transparencies, fonts with the on-screen, and buttons that would be detected and acted on. So we knew enough to get the SDK kit understood and be able to apply some examples and make this thing to something that could actually be like a visual novel engine thing. So the next step was to create a script, the second half of this thing that would actually go through, open up a file, and process line by line the dynamic loading of these resources and the strings and all this stuff. So that was broken up into 7 different parts. First one, hello world again. Just want to make sure that I can actually write this thing. Learn how to open up the file, how to read a line of text. Then we moved into the script engine code and separated it out so it's not outside of the main function. It has its own dedicated set of files. And then start working with the data structures. Like, how do we take the data that's from these files into a data structure that we can work with, manipulate, update, use it to load up assets, learn how to compare strings to figure out, okay, is this a dialogue or is this going to be something that will be an action? Eventually led into creating functions that handle different command tokens. Something that I had put in where it's an ampersand, and then like a command like an actor. Like we want to load an actor, or to say actor, we want to display it on one side of the screen, or to show a graphic in the background, stuff like that. So all these commands and all these different things would be run during runtime of the script. It would load the resources, give commands, and it would be processed and interpreted by this engine and then acted on. Eventually we got it to work as a script engine, and now we just had to figure out how to plug it in back into the PSP SDK portion of the code. And so finished off with getting actually tested the night of this thing and actually seeing it come alive. So I'm telling you, like, it was great to see something actually work, something you can actually run only in your hand and be able to actually play this and create your own stories and run it on here using this engine. It's basic framework. It's just something that people can get started with, but at least they can have fun learning how to put this thing together. So very, very happy about this.
He did make it pretty, I guess, modular. So like while he was still like fine-tuning stuff in the engine, he made this in such a way that like I could write the script on, you know, my own machine on the other side of the room, and or work on art elements, or find, you know, like work on the music or something, and then as I got done with it, I could send it over to him, and then he could plug it in. And it was, I mean, it's like that's kind of like, you know, best practice for like large development teams. But it was like it's just the two of us in our living room, and just he worked it out so that we could do it like that and make revisions quickly to, you know, like dialogue or positioning on the screen. It was really cool, like to see him like, you know, make this like from scratch and in a very short amount of time. Like this guy like basically didn't sleep for I know you were up to like 5 and then you went to work.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So, but it was a lot of fun being able to get, I guess working in those limited periods of time makes it a personal challenge, and I felt a lot of joy not only working on this. At one point, again, I wanted to give up because I felt like there wasn't enough time to do it, but when you ask God for help and you ask wonderful people like wife and other folks to just lock in with you,
supportive spouse,
it really makes a difference. It really does. So I'm really glad that we have something to show for this type of stuff, where, you know, we could take, you know, games like this and make it something that is, you know, something that's alive.
It's a thing.
Yeah. And with the first game being made like this, it's like putting focus back on God, something that has an eternal value, something that, you know, brings people back into their relationship with God, saying, hey, you know, I feel like I understand what this guy's going through because I'm going through it myself. You know,
yeah.
Life is unfair and life is hard, and I don't know why this stuff is happening to me and nobody wants to listen to me, but I feel like what I want to say and do is important. And yeah, just want to encourage that. So whether you're programming or you just want to talk about stuff that's on your mind, you guys should be able to feel free to do that. Something that would encourage you to speak your mind, be bold, be creative, and just have fun with this.
And don't give up.
Yeah.
Don't give up.
But yeah, stuff going into the future. I'm hoping that I'll be able to lock into some of the rest for the PSP. Been following that development excitedly, and I've been looking forward to trying out more of their examples to understand more of that framework, cargoes, and just all that stuff. I've also been looking at the Stardust, looking forward to seeing some of their work being done to get more of these game engines available for folks to use. So been following that one too. So excited for that one to get more work on. And also looking into the past, looking at the Allegro library that's for the PSP, something that allows you to develop for DOS and Windows and for, you know, PSPs. And I like that type of thing. So I'm going to be exploring that area. One challenge I want to send out to our community is to work on audio examples, something that would make it easier for folks to learn how to work with channel management, the buffer of the streams, audio decompression formats, things that would make it easier for folks to explore working with audio, since it's something that's been not exactly an easy thing to do already. And for new folks coming in, they could use that type of support.
You know, speaking, I mean, just the audio, it tends to take a back seat in development. Like we get real focused on graphics or an interface. And when you run, it's like the audio makes the rest of the world. Like if you think about like some of your favorite like AAA titles, like we love Monster Hunter.
Yeah.
Like if you play like classic like Monster Hunter Freedom Unite on the PSP, put on some good headphones, and it's like immersive. It feels like you're in like a forest. And you don't really notice that until like you cut off the audio, and then you're like, what happened to the birds? You know, focus on your audio and it'll take your stuff to the next level.
Because the second half of what you're creating, it's the environment and that experience that people go in, because not only do they see it, but they also hear it. They should not taste it though. All right. Again, thank you for allowing us to be a part of this, being able to share our excitement. I encourage anybody to access this stuff. The video game and its source code is available through jennygames.com or through the itch, jennygames.com.
itch.io.
And yeah, we look forward to any questions and feedback that the community has for us.
All right, we have a question from Wouter. Did you make it in Rust? Programming language.
Unfortunately, the video game was not created in Rust. At the time, I didn't feel like I had a strong enough grasp of Rust to create the game in it, and I figured it'd be easier if I focus on the PSP SDK kit first, since it was the first PSP game that I had created. But also, there's a lot of documentation on how to use it, a lot of community experience using it, and it just made a good first step in that. Obviously, I like to look forward to writing up some code in Rust for the PSP. So, yeah.
Next time.
Next time.
Next time, okay. Seems like you're just getting a lot of praise in chat.
Again, we're just really grateful to be a part of this community and be able to develop a game like this. Obviously, we got inspired because somebody else in the past had the boldness to do something, and we're just kind of picking up on that. But yeah, I just want to say thanks for everybody for wanting to enjoy this game and see it. You can see the full video play as well on itch.
Yep. There's also a question here from Nadine Monica. Does the engine support text input?
Currently, the game engine is not designed for accepting text input in the game. However, the script is designed where you can write up your own script and have it run at runtime. So if you change it, you don't have to recompile the program to accept those changes, or to load new graphics, or to write up a totally different story.
I could see where the engine that he developed could be probably extended a little bit to allow for text input because of the way he developed it to accept like a separate text file script and at runtime. So like there's definitely room in it to do that. Yeah, but it doesn't do that right now.
All right. As Frame Breeze puts it, they explained it so well that there are no more questions left.
Yeah, that's great. We're happy to. There's no questions. But yeah, again, have fun. Again, thank you for allowing us to be here.
Yeah,
been a pleasure.
Yep. Thank you for presenting as well. All right, next up, let's see. Looks like we have Davidgf and Fjtruly on the PSP development toolchain and its development stories.
Right. Me try to share my screen. Can you guys hear me?
You should be able to be heard. Let's see.
It's just the first time I
all right.
used thingy, right?
Yeah, you just need to share your screen. That's all.
There we go. Let's give it a try. You should be now, right? All right. Awesome. So yeah, we are Fran. His username is Fjtruly, it's a bit unreadable, and Davidgf. We've been working over the past months on like the PSP toolchain. You might know Fran because he also worked along with other folks. I think Maximus32 was one of them on the PS2 toolchain, and they've done a lot of work and great work there. So he also decided to work on the PSP toolchain, and he sort of dragged me into it. I've been in the PSP community now and then. Like I did some homebrew like many years ago. Maybe you remember it. Toy Wars was like a 3D game. So I've been sort of like around. I'm gonna give like a small introduction on the toolchain for like people who like are not very familiar with like a toolchain is and what it looks like. So I'm gonna focus on the parts we've done and not as much on other parts. So sorry for if I do not like explain a lot of others people's work, but just to simplify a bit. So a toolchain, as some of you probably know already, is like what produces your binaries that you can run software on the PSP. I usually divide it into like two blocks, like things that sort of like run on your computer or that you use on your computer, like the compiler, some tools, and the things that actually run on the PSP, like for example, libraries or resources, sort of the things that you end up in the binary and that you use on the PSP itself. And the question that some people might ask, like these days consoles are pretty much computers, that why do we even need like a toolchain, like a special toolchain for developing things on the PSP? And I would say like the main two reasons are the hardware is like non-standard, like the CPU is very weird. It has all sorts of like specialized hardware, so it requires some tools to like specialize, do specific things for it. Also, because like we have a non-standard operating system. That's like, it's not Linux or Windows, so the interface between the user app and the operating system is different. So we need some sort of like layer to like cope with these small issues, small differences. So the toolchain these days is composed on like what we know as PSP dev repo, which is like contains the compiler and things like newlib and the SDK, but also some tools like the PSP link or the eboot signer, for instance. That's the thing that you just download as a tar or some other file, and that's available for Mac, Windows, and Linux, I think. It's like a big block that you just download and install and use it. That's what I'm going to talk about it. We also have the Pacman repo for PSP libraries that other folks have developed. That's going to be out of this presentation. Right. So the toolchain itself is like mainly divided in like 4 blocks, like 4 big chunks of software that we use. The first one would be being utils, and the second one would be GCC. These sort of 2 things work together very well, but they're like essentially 2 different software packages and with 2 different separate teams and code bases. So Being Utility is mostly what contains the assembler and some other tools like the disassembler, the linker, and these days it also contains GDB to be a separate project. And GCC, of course, is like the compiler. That's like C and C++ compiler, and contains small other things like all the LTO wrappers, and it's growing pretty complex these days. The other block that's pretty important is the C library, which for we use a newlib, which is sort of like embedded libc and also mathlib for many like small devices such as PSP, but also like you can find it in other places like routers. There's many of these libraries, but we specifically use newlib because like it's the thing that most people use in like these very small embedded devices with not a lot of memory. And finally, PSP SDK, which is it's like essentially an amalgamation of a lot of things, particularly like the interface between the operating system and your program. Like it has all these like syscall stubs. So when you want to call some PSP OS function, you use those. It also contains all sorts of like things like the startup code that brings your binary into something that can actually start working, wrappers to other functions, and some utility functions. The status of these 4 sort of like blocks is as follows. For Being Utils, it exists a fork that essentially is like a fork from the original Being Utils that has some extra additions to it so that it can work better on PSP. In particular, it adds the BFPU instruction set, which is what a lot of people use for like fast math. It also has some other weirdnesses on the regular MIPS instruction set. That's because like the PSP CPU is a bit weird. Like it's a combination of MIPS 2 and 3. Like it has some instructions from architecture and some from other. Just I don't know, like Sony like customized it a lot for speed, I suppose. In GCC, we have almost vanilla GCC. It has a lot of small things, but it's not a lot. Like the patch is very small. It adds some extra instructions because, as I said, like PSP doesn't really fall on MIPS 1, 2, or 3. It's like a combination of these architectures. And also, we feature some C built-ins, so like you can use some GCC built-ins that the CPU provides for you. NewLib, at this moment, we are like using sort of like vanilla NewLib, but it used to be different. Like it used to have its own patches and stuff, but the goal is like to use something like it's like just NewLib and not a lot of PSP specific code. We moved like some of this stuff to PSP SDK. And of course, like PSP SDK, which we haven't changed that much, but as I said, like we moved some of the complexity from NewLib to PSP SDK. And now all these like glue code between the POSIX interface and the PSP operating system interface lives under source libc glue. Some of the work that Fran did, and it helped us like a lot to migrate some of the versions of NewLib, for instance. I'm going to focus on what we've done in this particular set of tools and what improvements it brings. So for BinUtils, we were stuck on version 2.23.2, which is rather old. I think it's like more than 10 years old. And at that time, it featured like a separate GDB and BinUtils. So like we were grabbing GDB from another repository, but since they merged the two projects now, we couldn't use that. We also had like our own custom patches from GDB. It was hard to rebase. The main reason for that is like because version 2.24 introduced a lot of changes on the MIPS backend. So many that rebasing was hard. Like they essentially revamped almost the entire MIPS backend to make it better. And just like MIPS backend had a lot of new CPUs coming in, like Longsun Chinese CPUs. And I guess it was hard for them to keep track of all these changes. It was growing too complex and they rewrote it. What I ended up doing is essentially writing most of the original patches for this version into the newer version. Like now we're using 2.37. That took quite a bit of work, but I'm happy that we did that because like we can now use a much more modern version of BinUtils. Also, in this during this process, there was a process already. Like some people started. I think it was Castern that started this, but Fran sort of finished it. We started moving some of these things to their own repos. We used to have like just a patch file, but now each of these things have their own repo under PSP deb. So this is where the BinUtils GDB repo lives now. For GCC, we were at version 9.3, and we were like rather okay in this one because like a lot of people in the community have like been maintaining GCC. Like I did myself a few years ago, like some rebase, and other people also did rebases, and we had like a rather recent version of GCC, which was great for like development because getting stuck in like GCC 4 sucks. And since the patches are relatively small, I think it was rather easy to rebase. So that was the good part. We finally ended up rebasing it to GCC 11, which is like I think it's the latest version as of today. And while at it, I spent some time trying to improve some small bits. There was not a lot to improve, but I tried to like make sure that everything that we could do, we did. For example, I added these instructions, this semantic in GCC that allows byte swaps automatically. So if you have like your own byte swap routine, it will pick it up automatically and just replace it with a single instruction, which should be much faster. Some people were using like inline assembly or built-ins, but now you just your like standard C code, and GCC is smart enough to pick it up and optimize it for you. As I said, like it lives in its own repo. I would like to emphasize that if you guys find any bugs or regressions, either with GCC or BinUtils, please do say, because we did introduce a few bugs after the release. I think we fixed all of them, but there's always like a bug that you never know. And unless you guys report it to us, or even if you don't know whether it's a bug or not, if you suspect it might be a bug, please let us know, because otherwise it's very hard for us to track these bugs. So for newlib, we were essentially stuck on a version that was rather old, like 1.2. That must be very old, I think. I don't know how many years. And it was a bit complex. It had a lot of patches and a lot of hackiness around. And Fran did the effort to like migrate to newlib 4, which is I think like the latest version of newlib. And during this process, what his goal was like to make sure that we used a vanilla newlib. Like we didn't have a lot of like hacks on top of it. And I think it's mostly vanilla newlib plus minus a few configuration knobs. And most of the complexity, like this glue code between POSIX and PSP OS now lives, as I said, like in the SDK, which makes it much easier for us to like reason about, because like it's some code that really shouldn't be in newlib. Newlib should be more or less agnostic to what operating system you're using. It just requires a few configuration bits to know which features are enabled and which ones are not. So yeah, that was a great improvement, I would say. Yeah, this is PSP SDK. Sorry, I said it's newlib because I forgot to update it. So as I said, like this was mostly unchanged. We just moved some code around. But in the process, we added a few more extra stuff. I think some new syscalls and stubs were added, and some refactor took place. And I also think that Fran spent some time like trying to optimize things a bit, like for example, simplifying some of the startup code and cleaning up some old mess that we had over there. Also, like spend some time on like figuring out why like our binaries were bigger or like or not as small as you would think for like a simple hello world. And in that process, I think he removed a lot of complexity. So I think we should be in a much better position. Like rather, a bit, binary should be small compared to before. I hope that's true. And if you find like some cases where like we are like adding some garbage to your binary, please let us know, and we can so that we can take a look and see what's going on there. Because it's not trivial sometimes. It's hard to track what's going on with so many changes. All right, so for the current BeanUtils fork, since we have it like a modern version, I think like version 2.38 came out on February, like last February, so like a month ago. So in order to do this, I wrote like some small testing suite. I mean, I wouldn't call it like a testing suite because it doesn't really test everything, but this was some tools and scripts and binaries that I created so that we could compare two different versions of BeanUtils. I used this extensively to ensure that I was not introducing any regressions or any incompatibilities, and that my code sort of made sense. But still, like on the official, like on the BeanUtils fork, we don't have any new tests for the instructions that we add, and I think that's something that I want to fix and add for like the next version, 2.38. To make sure that things are clean and people can actually like test the code and just wishful thinking. I do have a plan to integrate this test, and probably like some of these tests are going to be automatically generated, but we'll see. But the sort of like future plan, like a midterm plan for this year, is to attempt upstreaming our fork. It's a pain to like keep rebasing things, and I look into other platforms like, for example, PS2, and PS2 has a proper support for the MIPS R5900 CPU that they use. So they have all their like sort of like BFPU-like instructions. They have some special instructions for like quick math and stuff. They managed and they achieved like this upstreaming. It's been a few years already then since BeanUtils has support for that. I think we should try to attempt at least this and see where it takes us. Maybe we cannot upstream everything, maybe just a few instructions, or maybe we cannot upstream some of the hacks we have there. But I will try my best and refactor the code and make it like usable and upstreamable so that people do not think it stinks. But it's gonna take a while. The main issue that I found about this because I went back and looked at the upstream support for PS2. And the thing is that for PS2 we had like proper documentation. Like there's like a Toshiba manual for the CPU that you can just go and download. The PSP, that's not the case. So before we attempt an upstreaming, we want to work on some like proper documentation. So at the moment, I'm not going to show anything because it's like pretty much bare bones. But I'm working on like some BFPU documentation that's sort of like a testable documentation. So the goal is like you describe the instructions in some sort of format, and with that and a bunch of scripts, you can generate of the bin utils assemble table, so that you don't have to like manually code them. Also, it can generate tests that you can run on PSP. You can see that actually what you describe instruction being, it is. So like, for example, if we have like a v-add instruction, I can describe what it does, and we can actually test on a real device and say, oh yeah, this instruction does what it says, and the description is accurate, and anyone can like trust that documentation. It's not just like wishful thinking, because there's a lot of documentation for BFPU, like many sources, like forums, different websites, different repositories, but they all have like these small inconsistencies, and unless we have like proper tests that demonstrate what the instructions do, we're always going to have like these small mismatches. And once I have that, I'll try to publish a 2.38 version with like less hacks and fixing some of the bugs that I found, because like the previous version also had bugs. And we'll attempt streaming and see how that works. Maybe slow, might take months, but if we can like make bin utils and that team own this code, we can like make sure that in many years we can still like build software for PSP, because nobody has to really maintain this toolchain. It would be like sort of like self-maintained. So for GCC newly PSP SDK, there's not a lot of upstreamable material, I would say. Like GCC is almost vanilla, newlib is mostly vanilla, and PSP SDK is something that we always gonna own, right? We are like the sort of truth. But there's always improvements we can do. We improved like the POSIX compatibility in PSP SDK, and I think that's been great, but there's always room for improvement. So if you guys have ideas on like if you try to port your library and it doesn't really work, and you can think that there's some improvement we could do so that it's easier to port libraries and software to the PSP, let us know. For GCC though, there's one patch that I'd like to upstream, and I think it shouldn't be that hard. And this is a patch that is a bit weird, because like the Allegrek CPU is a bit weird. It only supports hardware single precision floating point, and any double precision floating point is emulated in software. So this is not just the case of the PSP, but also the PS2. So this particular patch is present in both toolchains, and I would like to attempt to upstream this, because like if we have two machines that have this particular case, I think it would be a good case to upstream it in the GCC upstream repo, and I think it sort of makes sense. It's a very small patch, so it should be fine, I think. As I said, like we've worked, I think Fran fixed a lot of these things in our toolchain. Like we reduced the page alignment requirements so that we do not have to have 4K pages anymore. I think now it's like 128 bytes or something like that. This is great because it saves some memory. Like if you, especially like your program has several sections, we usually have like 3 or 4, but it helps reducing size for like small programs or like programs with many sections. And he also needs to change to recover some RAM that was not being used. I think all our programs were linked 1 megabyte after of the memory of the user memory section beginning, and that's because some software uses this area for some stuff. But we took a look, and I think most of that megabyte can be reduced because things like PSP Link only use a few kilobytes at the beginning of the section to introduce the GDB stub. So we sort of gain back almost a megabyte. I think it's less, 800 kilobytes or something like that. So this is great for programs or emulators that use a lot of memory. In this process, we also put a focus on LTO because it can give a performance boost on some programs or emulators. And I saw that it was sort of broken, not too bad, but there was like a small things here and there that had to be fixed for LTO to work. And I think I would encourage people to maybe use LTO if you can, because like it will give you some much for free performance. It's a bit slow at compiling, but it's free performance for like releases. All right, and yeah, I sort of tried to put together some totally anecdotal data. Please do not quote me on any of this data, because it's like totally cherry picked. But I built some emulators and small programs with like an old toolchain I had, like GCC 9, like 2 years old, and the new one, of course. I did it with and without LTO, and sort of like took a very rough like FPS comparison, like on how fast the new version it is compared to the old one. Some like literally like numbers, just to have an idea of like, is it really doing something? And I also like investigated like a bit what it was doing, like why GCC was producing different code. And what I found is like in some cases you can have up to 25% performance gains, which is crazy. I think most of the time is like 5, maybe 10%. But it's like free performance just for using a new toolchain, which is cool. What I found out is like GCC 10 and 11 have improved a lot, like things like instruction scheduling and things like that. Even though the MIPS backend is pretty old and nobody's working on it, some of the improvements on the intermediate passes and optimizations sort of like land in our code. And it just emits less instructions, or it's smarter, like enrolling loops and things like that. So in the end, you get some small performance bump, and in some cases it's pretty big. Also, so this is like most like a joke, but like the new bean utils is much faster. It doesn't matter because like you don't really use the assembler that much. It's only like a few milliseconds per build. But yeah, it's cool that the refactor they did just speeds up a lot the assembly time of like big programs. And also like totally anecdotal data, but I did compare some like rather big builds, like software like that has like boots between like 8 and 12 megabytes. And what I found is like new toolchain produces smaller binaries, which I thought would be the opposite, because like the more features, the more performance usually means more code, but it was around average 5% smaller binaries, which I guess is cool because like we are loading all these binaries into RAM. So the smaller the binary, the more RAM, the more heap and stack space you've got for your program to run, right? So this is pretty much a net gain, I would say. And yeah, last but not least, I'd like to discuss a bit like future improvements and what we could do potentially to like improve even further the toolchain. This is just a bunch of ideas that I had, or like some plans that we've discussed with some people, and some wishes that I've seen in the Discord. So if you have some wishes, you can tell us, and maybe if it's like doable and we are up to it, we can do that. But things from the top of my head are like perhaps improve our libc a bit. Like, I'm not sure how that useful that be, but like some routines like memcopy, memset, the classic routines that your C library provides, even be it like string compare, things like that, could potentially benefit from like PSP specific versions. Many platforms you will see that like for example in 386 CPUs, there's like a bunch of implementations of memory copy, memset. They try to use the host CPU as much as possible and optimize as much as possible. So you can find like very interesting implementations of these functions, not just like your vanilla C version of it. That can make a huge difference depending on the program, right? Like for some emulators might not be a big deal, but for some homebrew, memcopy could be like a game changer. I don't know. The other thing that I heard some people complain, I think it was more on the beta side, but maybe in PSP as well, like the FS routine layer added a bit of an extra layer, so it can be slower in some cases than just using the SC file routines. I've seen evidence of this in some code bases where people just like do not use the standard file input-output libraries, but they use the Sony, well, like the SCE open close routines instead. So if that's the case, might be something there, and we could potentially improve it. The thing that I've heard some people demanding is better threading, like for example, supporting STD thread. So good news is that we're onto it. In particular, Fran has also already like a proof of concept, and he published today a few jars, and I think some demo. Like it's, we're working on it. He's working on it. It seems to be working. So maybe in a few weeks we have something that works, and we have yet more, even more modern C++ functionality in the PSP, which would be great, right? For the LTO side of things, I think we should start, like for example, building the new lib and the PSP SDK with LTO support, because like right now most of the LTO games come from like your sort of like code. Like it doesn't really like generate LTO support for the libraries. So it'd be great like if we could add more LTO support for like libraries and the SDK or the libc, so that if you want to use LTO, you get as much gain as you can possibly hope for. Like the whole thing is considered as a single program, and you can squeeze all the performance to the very last bit. It can lead to serious performance depending on what your program does. Again, it's like very program specific. I've myself been developing some emulator, and in some very high performance emulators, the difference is 0, because like it's so like optimized already that there's not going to be any difference at all. I also thought like maybe we could improve a bit the GDB support, and I think that's some of this also might be on the PSP Link side. There's not a lot of support for like BFPU stuff. I'm not sure how true that is, but I haven't found any ways to like dump BFPU registers or like dump some of the control registers as well. I think there's support or limited support in PSP Link, but somehow GDB is not aware that we have all those registers. Looking quickly in the repo, I saw that there's some extensions to add that support, but we didn't add them. So there's room for improvement over there. And yeah, that's pretty much what I thought. So if you have, I don't know, any ideas, like things that we should definitely work into or look into and try to improve, let us know. I guess that's time now for questions.
All right. We have a few questions already lined up. Okay. First one, question for later. Is newlib updated in your toolchain fork? I remember a time where I wanted to use SCD to string, but using GCC without libc, GNU libc prevented me from using it, causing linking errors.
Oh, okay.
So,
no idea from the top of my head.
Yeah.
You can always like hit up like me or Fran or like just the developing channels, and we're really happy to like dig into it. Especially if you can provide like, let's say like a very small like sort of like reduced demo, like like 10-20 lines file demo where like you can reproduce the bug. That's like perfect, because like we can just go jump into it and actually fix it.
Yeah, the other part of the question is newlib updated in your toolchain fork? I'm assuming yes.
Yes, I mean we updated it to version 4, so I think it's up to date as it could be.
They might be asking if it's being built in with the current, the newest toolchain. I think maybe.
Oh, yeah, I think it's been in for like a couple of months or maybe more. So I think latest release should have it. But I'm a bit fuzzy when like it comes to like releases. I think Fran is more knowledgeable about that. So yeah, I would say just ask in the Discord, and if you find some inconsistency, we can take a look.
All right, makes sense. Another question: could you elaborate more on the improved POSIX compatibility?
Sure. So Newly provides like a lot of all the POSIX sort of standard goals, but some of them were not implemented. It means that if you like I forgot an example, but we had like an example like around usernames, like there's like this function that will give you like the shadow structure, like to like give to get a username given the user ID of the system, things like that. I think some library was using this call just, for example, to get your home directory, things like that. So some of these functions were not implemented in the SDK. So like if newly you add this function in your homebrew and try to link it, you will get some linker errors, such as like, this function is not implemented. And in this process, we added a few of them, not many though, but a few of them. And we are very like open to adding new functions that are missing, because they just make boring libraries so much harder. Like, when you build a library, you get like 10 linking errors and you have to figure out why, maybe patch the library because like it's doing something that's like very Linux dependent, and you cannot do that in the PSP. Think about like, for example, permissions on files or things that are like a bit different on the PSP. So this improving the POSIX compatibilities, like implementing some of these, faking out some others, because in some cases you have to sort of like fake the responses, sort of thing.
All right. And then another question is, are pthreads or some other threading API supported right now?
Yeah, there's support for pthreads right now. I think a couple of people, I think Wouter already replied that. Yeah, pthreads is working. It's based on the pthreads embedded from Davidgf. It's using the Vita. I think it's like pretty much the same interface in both devices. The difference was like STD thread was not enabled because it's like a feature you have to enable when you build a compiler. If you try to like use STD threads, it will just like fail miserably. I forgot what it was, like it didn't link, or you would get like a crash, something like that. We're working towards like making sure that STD threads works, even though that pthreads already worked, but it might be more convenient to just use STD threads instead.
All right. I think we're good on questions now. So, all right. Thank you for presenting today.
Guys, awesome.
Yeah, I'm up next, right?
Yep, it looks like you are up next with K on Houkago Live.
Indeed.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm FrameBreeze, and for the past few months, I've been working on a translation project for the video game K-On! Houkago Live, or After School Live. Before I start, sorry for the shoddy presentation. I'm in the middle of a test week, so I really did not have that much time to spare. But yeah, what is this game? It's a rhythm game, and it was released in 2010 for the PSP, and 2 years later for the PS3. It is an anime. Well, it comes from an anime, basically, from the anime K-On!, and it has 19 songs from that show, all 5 main characters. And what's quite fun about this game is that for every character, every song has a different stream of notes, basically. So, for example, one of the characters is left-handed, and you'll see that in the note stream that there's a lot of notes that you have to hit with your left hand. But about the translation, currently a lot of stuff has already been done. For example, most of the reverse engineering, programming to make all the tools work, that's done. A lot of the texture edits are done. Also a lot of the menus, the text menus, but there's still quite a few events to do. Besides events, there's also just a few textures and menus left, but really not that many. And quite importantly, there's no easy way to currently patch the game. The only way to do it is using a command line program, which is not very user friendly. So the idea is to make a quote-unquote installer for that, like you can see in the corner here, which would allow you to take your vanilla ISO file, you would select some options, and then a few minutes later it would give you a English version of the game. So no need for any piracy or anything. You just rip your own ISO file, put it through the program, and you can put it back on your PSP. Or PS3, of course, because that one's also supported. Now, it started out as just a personal project for me, mostly just the reverse engineering and whatever. And then people started asking, like, hey, what are you going to do with that? And then the idea kind of came to make a full translation project out of it. And, well, shortly after I decided to do a full project, some other members joined, like Voxander and Yotsugi, and we all do different things on the project. So to give you a very, very quick overview, basically the magic is you get a lot of programs like Photoshop, Hex Editor, like 101 Editor, some special built programs for the formats that game uses, plus a lot of free time, and you get a translated game. And this is where I would be giving you a link to the patch, telling you it's all done. But sadly, life got in the way, so you'll have to wait a bit more for that. That said, I do post updates here every now and then, so if you're interested, scan this. Otherwise, I'll probably make a post in the PSP Homebrew server as well when it's finished. But other than that, I don't have much to say on the project at the moment. So it was just very quick announcements, really. But if there's any questions, I'd be glad to hear them and answer them. We'll see.
Okay, here we go. Question from John Medina. Does the songs include the second season as well?
No, sadly, because the game released before the second season of the anime aired, only songs that were available in the first season and some of the character songs are included. So no second season. Although I have been working on reverse engineering the formats, like used in the what are they called? Just the 3D models, the animations and stuff. So theoretically, in the future, it would be possible to add or custom make new songs for the game. Although that would be very far off. So I would not expect to see that within the next 5 years at least.
Oh wow. Okay. And then another two similar questions. Basically, how much longer until you would release the patch?
Well, I believe 4 months ago I said I'm expecting 1 to 2 months, and well, I'm sure you can see how well that's gone. I think we're at roughly 70% done with the entire thing, and after that there's still some polishing. So I would imagine less than half a year is my estimate. So I don't want to be much more specific than that because I can't really guarantee that.
All right.
So yeah.
Masterman comments that this has Project Diva vibes.
Oh, it really does, yeah. Although the gameplay is, well, I didn't show that, but I kind of did. right here at the bottom. It's not quite similar, but it's very similar vibes. Yeah. All right. It seems like that's it then.
Yeah. Thank you for presenting today.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and I am here. The best for the end. Okay, let's go. I will share my screen.
All right, let's see.
Is it working?
We can't see your screen.
Okay, I will just check quickly on the YouTube. Well, okay, let's go. So, as you probably already know, my presentation will be about how to create a game in 10 minutes with Gen 7 and Python. So it's not a clickbait. Well, we are going to do it. Well, you will see. So firstly, what's Gen 7 LiveDOM and LiveScript? So LiveDOM is a new feature of Gen 7. Oh, really?
Okay, now it's...
And now that's working. That's working or not?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I was speaking about LiveDOM. So LiveDOM is a new system to integrate DOM layouts like HTML files into Gen 7. However, we will not focus on that today. We will focus on LiveScript. So how to use this new system of using scripts to create Gen 7 applications or games. So firstly, what's Gen 7 LiveScript? In fact, it's a system to be able to read scripts.
So, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
It does not look like you're streaming your presentation. It just looks like you're streaming your Discord window.
Okay, so this can... Okay. Let me start. Right. So what the fuck is about? Screen. Okay, is it better now? I think it was...
Are you switched over to your
yeah.
presentation now? Is it still showing the Discord window? Well, there you go. Now it's showing your presentation.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think it was me. I forgot to show the screen instead.
All right.
So, well, we were at the third slide. Let me just show you a few seconds the second slide when I was speaking about LiveDOM and LiveScript. So yeah, like I said, it's DOM layouts. However, we will focus on LiveScript because that's the thing that is pretty important for our goal to create a game 10 minutes. So what is exactly LiveScript? In fact, as for now, we used to integrate directly your game code into Gen 7 and then compile that. However, we see that it isn't very practical. So now Gen 7 switched to integrated the scripts with LiveScript. So basically, you just have multiple files on your host file system. That can be the PSP, the Wii, or the Switch, the computer, Windows or Linux, or even web browser. Gen 7 used to support a web browser through mscripten. I didn't support it for long, but I will probably resume that. And all of this are stored on the host file system, and they are not into Gen 7. So it's the same player for all games, all application. You just need to add your files with it, and it will work as expected. I will put it full screen. It will be better for the effect. So yeah, you got it now. Gen 7 Full Logic is based on scripts, and that's a pretty large evolution on Gen 7 development, because it was never. Well, I never thought about it, because most engines don't work like that way, mostly because of performance. While we are not Unity, we are not Unreal, so performance is not very, very problematic, because simply people are likely to not do a masterpiece homebrews with 3A graphics assets and that kind of things. Well, so another reason that we didn't choose to make live scripts, it's mostly because actually it's very hard for a beginner to install a toolchain, to fix all the kind of issues that you can find, because even for a seasoned developer, it's hard, because sometimes it's just about your setup and not clear documentation, not updated web page, other problems around that. So scripts fix all of that. No more hassle. You don't have anymore all this shit to install. We don't fuck about it at all. You just put the files, you run the player, and you're all right. All your game is working like expected. That's the thing that's pretty important, because you can program your game on almost any system if you want. You can even use your phone to write the script. It's not a problem, and then you just run the player on an emulator like PPSSPP that is available on Android, and you can go with it, and that's not problematic at all. And also for support, because when I used to distribute Gen 7 as an executable with other SDK, where there were copyright issues, for example, about your distribution, many people that had problems that are almost unfixable, because it was so specific to their system that you need to take their PC and see what's going on. And now we don't have any more of this issue. We just put the files again and run the player. And that's done. Everything is working. So now there are another issue. So what's scripting language? Because that's pretty important, since we are basing all our Gen 7 functionality on scripting. Well, I thought about the three choices. That's my choices. Maybe you wouldn't use them, but I thought about them. So firstly, we got Python. So to be honest, I don't like Python. It's pretty early. If you already did see like no more semicolons, everything based on tabulations. What the fuck that really? That's almost counterintuitive for any program, but it's used. The documentation around it, and actually it's more a comfort issue than something else. Perfectly functional. So it can be a solution. We have two basic, because basic have a history. It has been around for more than 20, even 30 years, and it's basic. It's been interpreted on the like the name is saying. Well, it should be basic. Actually, it's a brain fuck. It's impossible to program with basic. It's almost assembly. So I forgot about it. And you got the absolutely beautiful JavaScript. So yeah, JavaScript. I think I don't need to say a lot about it. It's just the way you do classes, for example, prototypes and all that thing. No. So I saved you, and I didn't go with the JavaScript way. So final verdict, we will take Python, we will integrate Python in Gen 7, and we use Python in Gen 7. And so everyone will be happy with that, I hope. And the good thing about Python, it's a supported language. Now JavaScript is being replaced by TypeScript. And Basic, well, it's not even the phase of not being anymore supported. It's in the phase of being forgotten at all. So, well, final verdict, Python. Now let's play. We will make our game in less than 10 minutes. Well, I am sorry about that, but I will not be able actually to do it live because I was messing with the Gen 7 core because I wanted to integrate a last minute feature for the presentation, and as a result, I broke everything. So that's pretty unfortunate. However, I have a version that I have already compiled and it's working. So I will show you how it's made, and that will be better. I hope to fix pretty quickly the issue so I can upload the player into on the server, and so anyone will be able to play around it. So firstly, how it works, Gen 7 automatically search for a star.py file. So it will be the first py file that Gen 7 will play. And you get two main methods. You need to implement them. You get start and you get update. Yeah, probably if you already use the Unity engine, it's pretty familiar because actually it's almost the same concept. Start is calling at the first frame actually of your scene. It's the kind of things to make ons when the scene is created. So here we create just 3 sprites. We have the X coordinate here, the Y coordinate here. You get the visibility. It's if it's less than 0, it's not visible. You get the object name, and well, you probably guessed already. It's the texture file. That can be PNG, BMP, GPG, Targa, everything you want, as long as it's a popular format, not exotic like DGS and this kind of shit. So you get also the second method, that's update, and that's actually called at every frame. So, for example, all the interactions with the user have to be made in update, because in start it's to create the assets, to create the things you will need in the scene, so you don't create them at every frame, but that you reuse them in the update methods. So we got simply if button down, so we just detect if the down button is pressed, and if it is pressed, we will update the sprite kit and play. Actually, we will play this game. You will see what it gives. It's so simple. You see that it fits in one slide, and it's not complex or anything like. And you can also press the up button, so you will be it's useless that I explain you that in detail. As soon as I will show you at the PSSPP the result, you will immediately understand how it works. And then if button A, so if you press the actually, why button A? Because Gen 7 is multi-platform, and it's more comfortable for me and what I see for other people to use the standard A, B, X, and Y. So we just go with that, and so that's actually linked with the X button. And so when we press the cross button more for PSP, you load the scene game.py. And game.py, well, that's a basic platforming system, very basic. You will see why. We will run that basically. So first I will show you a little of the files. So no, that's not here. So you get the sprites. in BMP. Right here, you can see that I have directly put the tile in the background because I had a performance issue. Actually, since I broke the rendering system, so I need to go with the SDL backup system. This is pretty old, and since the SDL system is not optimized, so I baked the sprite right here for the demo. But actually, in the going to be released version, it uses OpenGL, so that's perfectly optimized. It's cached, and that's mostly because it was used also by the 3D demo that I will show you later. So you get the boot.pbp file, so that's the thing you boot on your PSP. And you get also and another update. Now it's not anymore start.py, it's home.py. Home.py that then runs game.py, so the same game.py we get here. Right here, that's our game.py, that's our home.py. So we execute that, drag and drop. No, it's not that file. So we got a small menu, so basic menu of our platform. You can choose if you want to play or if you want to kit. That's all implemented in the home.py. So we have created our 3 sprites. We got the background that is here at 0, 0. You need to always remember that the 0, 0 coordinate is there. And so it goes up that way for Y and that way for X. You get also the start methods that I explained previously. So you create the 3 sprites. Other update, because as you can see, when I press the down button, it tells us if you want to kit. So right here, it updated the sprite kit with kit underscore pressed.png. That one. So it replaced that one by that one. That's pretty simple. And same thing for the play. So it inverted the state, and so we get the play, the normal version of play, and not the press version. So let's play. So we get our little characters, so we can move around left or right. It's nothing complex. There are no collision systems, just moving the character around. We can also jump. Yeah, it's a very basic player. So it's also to show that we can make basic applications, and if you want, you can make complex things, since you have all the Python language for you to use anything you want almost, because actually it's a lightweight version of Python. There are some little things that aren't implemented, but it shouldn't be problematic for most of usage we are going to get on Gen 7. So how do we move the character? We can see we press the right button. We kept it pressed, so that's the nuance here. As you can see here, we don't have the press keyword. So actually that will be only triggered when we will click the button and we release it. However, for this one, it will be triggered if the button is actually pressed. So if you want a continuous movement, it's better to use the pressed methods, because otherwise you need to always release the button like that to move, and that's not comfortable at all. We have also the button B, which is the circle, I think. That's indeed the jumping, and when we have 1 in the variable jump, so it's superior to 0, and so we move the sprite we move the sprite up again because we have, as I told you already, we have the coordinate 0, at top. So if you want the player to jump to go at top, so we actually need to lower its coordinate. We increment jump, as you can see. That's also a reason I hate, actually I almost hate Python. I didn't have any choice. But we can do that. In a modern language, it's really not possible. So, well, you can do that, or you can do also that. That's really ugly, but we need to do with that. On when we have so incremented the variable jump by 9 times, so it's equal to 9. And then, the player falls, and we put jump to 0, so no more jumping. The action is disabled. Let's get back to that. So yeah, done in 10 minutes. It's not really true, actually. I don't know, because actually I made it when the conference already started, because as I thought, I broke everything, so I had to start a big part of it. But I do think I made it in less than 10 minutes. Yeah, of course. Well, actually, it depends of you. There's some people have a lot of how to say, you can almost program automatically, when other people have more. It's more difficult to get an idea of the algorithm to implement. But actually, about the engine, everything that the engine can do to make your life easier, it's made. For example, you don't have any complex management of the buttons or anything like. You just check if button down is 1 or not. Same thing for create sprite. You don't manage anything related to rendering. You just say to the engine, yeah, you will create me a sprite. I don't care of how you will do, but I want a sprite. And I heard the same thing. You want to update the sprite, and so the engine will follow. It will not tell you anything. It will just follow, and that's the good thing. So you can just let your creativity work and make anything you imagine. The limit is just you and what you want to do. And Gen 7 is actually an engine around for almost more than 4 years, yeah. So it's continuously updated. So I hope to have the time to add a lot more methods and ways to develop even easier than that. And I do think about the first time that Gen 7 was released. It was a fully visual programmation system. So you had to just place blocks, and these blocks were executed in the order you choose, and it was multiple form and all. However, I couldn't support it because it became pretty complex. But now with the scripting systems, it's likely that I will bring it back and put it live with a live script. So even if you don't want to touch code or anything, we just be able to use blocks like Scratch and all these basic frameworks and engines to develop your game and application. We really need to bring back all the power to the people. It's not only to the developer. No, anyone can be a developer. You just need to use the right tools. So that's also why we are on scripts, because you don't need to touch any toolchain or anything. You just need to make your py file and run it aside of the player, and it will go very well. No, what about 3D? Because if you remember well, I said in the title, create a game in 10 minutes. I didn't put it there. I have put it only in the announcement, I think. Create a 2D / 3D game. That's that's actually true. You can also create a 3D game. Why? Firstly, because Gen 7 is the masterpiece engineer for 3D. Of course, I am being very honest. No. There are a lot of great 3D engines like Stardust that is coming soon, and all this kind of engines. And so Gen 7 is also a part of that. We got I have put there 4 special demos to illustrate that. We get the model importing demo, the photogrammetry model of you probably know what's that. We got had a dolphin that's swimming, and actually that was animated on Blender. That was exported to a custom file, which was compressed using ZFP. You can look if you want more details about that in the previous PSP HDC. And we get also that was for the game jam. Actually, all the scene was created in Blender, and it was just exported to Gen 7. Gen 7 was able to parse almost all the files that Blender generated to reconstitute the scene. So you just need to add interaction on Gen 7. Gen 7 goal is really to make life easier, to make, to democratize homebrew development. It shouldn't be something reserved for only seasoned developers or anything like. Homebrews should be accessible from everyone, and even the tools should be accessible. It shouldn't be hard or anything like. It's not because you have Actor or console or something like that you need to be a guru that's watching 24 hours and 24 hours tutorials on how to break into assembly assembly things and that things. So yeah, now I have put a small example of how you will implement it in the coming soon release of LiveScript for 3G for Gen 7 3G. To just be a create asset model. So we just say to Gen 7 to register on memory or a model file. That's OBJ. OBJ is a very popular, very democratic format. It's around for more than 10 years. It supports basic materials, basic textures. Also hierarchy. Well, no, basic texture. Actually, it supports any texture. It's just a format. Sorry about it. Model, of course, and so you can do already almost anything with that. Well, we are not speaking about an Unreal Engine, Gen 7 engine, but so we don't have advanced shading, for example, on the thing. But you get almost other toolkit to be able to create a nice game. And if you want also, for example, here I remember that the light was light baked. So you can do also this kind of things to have really nice results. You can almost say it's impossible that it's being rendered on a PSP or something like that. Thankfully, with optimization, you can really do great things. For example, we have also the Suicide Barbie that have shown that we can do really awesome things when your program is enough optimized. And the good thing about Gen 7 is also the core is pretty optimized. Like, for example, that's why here you create an asset model before creating the model, because you can reuse the assets multiple times in your scene without creating for each one a specific zone in memory. You just batch the rendering, and so that's very efficient on the GPU. So here you just create the model at the coordinate 000. So yeah, we are in 3D now. You don't need F, of course. That's C, that's not Python, but this script is in Python. And if button up, yeah, you move the model on the X axis, and that's nothing hard. And that's really the goal. Again, it's to make life easier, to make homebrew easier and accessible to everyone. And I think you got it now. You got the idea. And yeah, now it's your turn with the N7 engine. So I hope to be able to release all what I used in this presentation actually on the player too, so you can build, you can create your own Pi scripts. That's good because you can share them also, and so anyone can test it with their player and on the platform that's supported, and you get the same results, and you get a pretty quick result because with Python you don't have any compilation process or anything. You just need, for example, to change that and to put whatever you want, any other texture you save, and you play on the emulator directly on the hardware. You get the results immediately. No hassle. Again, no hassle with Gen 7. That's the goal. Well, I think you got it. You got it. So thank you very much. Thank you for everyone that organized the PSP HDC, and really, I hope we will be able to continue that as much as we can under years. So thank you again. And yeah,
thank you for presenting as well.
Thank you. I forgot about the questions. Well, I am sorry, I am a little short on time, so I will let you ask the questions directly on the chat, and I will be able to answer them as soon as I get the time. Feel free to ping me or even to ping me. It's really not a problem. I am glad to be able to answer you and to see your questions. Thank you again.
All right. So it looks as if we've finished all of our presentations for today. Unless Acid Snake. Here we go. You want to present Arc?
All right.
Hello.
Yeah.
All right, we got Arc then.
Of course. Okay, so how do I start?
Go ahead and start sharing your screen.
Okay. Come on. Okay, I'm ready. Okay, so Arc 4, a custom firmware for PSP and PS Vita. Well, the PSP side of the Vita. So, as you guys know, the PS Vita has actual PSP hardware built into it. Not the entire thing, but it has the main CPU and the GPU. Everything else is handled by the Vita OS via an interface called CurbMid and some other stuff. So basically, you can view the PS Vita, the PSP side of Vita, as an actual PSP model per se, or like a very special model. The thing is, this meant that you could actually write custom firmwares for the PSP side of Vita. So a lot of old school developers from back in the day, especially TN, Total Noob, and the pro team, you know, Colbert, Neuron, etc. They got into the Vita scene on the PSP side and wrote these custom firmwares. And the good thing that these custom firmwares had was that they were written from scratch. Like, Arc wasn't actually an actual port of Pro custom firmware to the Vita. It was actually written from scratch. And because they didn't have to worry about a lot of legacy, old school PSP stuff, aside from, actually just being compatible with ISOs, homebrews, and plugins. So the end result was pretty simple, pretty lightweight, pretty, you could say, simple to use custom firmwares, and it also resulted in a lot of new developments. For example, because Sony kept making updates for the PS Vita, and with each new update, they would change the offsets and all of this stuff. So, recompiling the custom firmwares for new firmware versions was tedious. So we came up with new ideas that were not used before. Stuff like dynamically patching instead of just patching specific offsets that would most likely change with very minor changes in the original source code. The compiled version can have completely different offsets, despite the overall functions being the same. So, we created these new these new types of custom firmwares on the Vita scene for the ePSP. So my idea was, why couldn't we just bring these new developments over to the PSP to make it like a fresh new start? Like we already did that with the PS Vita. These custom firmwares were like a fresh new start. So let's bring that fresh new start over to the PSP, especially since there's not really any active custom firmware development right now. I mean, Pro has been updated. It was like 2013, almost 10 years ago. The same thing with ME, and these custom firmwares back in the day, they were forced to be similar to M33 in a way. So they have a lot of legacy stuff. They can be really bloated, really hard for new users, for noobs to just, I have a PSP, I download a few files, install them, and just use them. I don't have to go through advanced configurations that can mess up my PSP and stuff like that. So the bringing back a fresh new custom firmware to the PS Vita eliminates all of that. So it becomes much simpler, and it doesn't actually even lose any functionality over classic custom firmwares. So how do I bring a custom firmware that was made for the ePSP back into original real PSP hardware? Okay, so one of the good things, one of the major good points about Arc, at least Arc 2, Arc 2 and Arc 3, the last public versions, they use dynamic patching. We already started making dynamic patching in those firmwares, so it was a matter of just finishing up those dynamic patching, and it would just work on PSP. Another thing that I had to do was create a sort of abstraction layer that would separate PSP and Vita without the actual custom firmware noticing it. I'll talk about it later. So a few differences between a real PSP and a Vita. On PSP we have Flash 0, Flash 1, etc. We have full access to the memory stick. We have the XMB VSH modules. We have the Media Engine coprocessor, which allows for full sound on PS1 games, and other emulators also use them. We don't have any of this on PS Vita. On PS Vita, Flash 1, Flash 0, it's technically just a RAM. It's like a RAM disk, a RAM FS. It's not, you don't actually, when you write files to flash 0, it's on the PS Vita RAM. It doesn't actually get written onto any permanent space. We don't have full access to the memory stick on PS Vita. We have access via an interface. So there's certain limitations that Vita OS has. For example, we cannot create eboot files, but we can totally create eboots with another name, like vboot, or we have other names. And XMB is not present on PS Vita, but you can make it work. Like, that's how Adrenaline does it. You can patch it to make it work. I don't do that on Arc because I try to be fully open source and not dependent on official Sony modules other than the ones actually installed on the retail unit. And okay, no media engine, so PS1 games don't have sound unless you create a custom sound plugin. There's been some attempts. Other restrictions to, like I said, you cannot create eboots, you cannot create folders inside PSP games, so you have to use another folder for your homebrews. Okay, so about patches. Okay, so classic custom firmware use hard-coded offsets to patch the official firmware module. So I want to patch a function. I gotta know exactly where to patch. And what classic custom firmware did was just know exactly where to patch. You would tell it the exact offset. Like I said, Sony does a minor change, recompiles it, and it totally messes up the offsets and your custom firmware stops working. So a better approach would be to actually create an algorithm that scans for what I like to call magic instructions. These instructions are unique within the module that you want to patch, so they only appear once. And you can use them to know exactly where you are within that module and figure out where you have to patch using relative offsets instead of instead of absolute offsets. This allows you to have more control over the patcher, so it is less sensitive to changes in the offsets, because even if you change the structure of the function, the actual instructions and the actual logic will always be the same, so you can use that to your advantage. One example would be the load exec module. Okay, so a traditional custom firmware would have just one line of code where they just do a store word on the absolute specific exact address. But here instead, what we do is we scan for this particular instruction, and we know this instruction only appears exactly once in the entire module, and it appears always just before the instruction that we want to patch. So we just scan for this instruction, and when we find it, we patch the next one, and we're done. And this works on every PSP model ever. It works on 1K, it works on 2K, 3K, PSP Go, PSP Street, PS Vita, and all of them have completely different load exec modules, completely different offsets, even within the same firmware. But they all have these particular instruction that we can use to identify exactly where we want to patch. We can apply this to pretty much every other official firmware module, and we have a custom firmware that can work on pretty much every PSP model on 6.60 firmware. Okay, so another aspect of the custom firmware is the simplicity in how it was created. Because ePSP, you don't really have a launcher, you don't have an XMB. You had to use a custom launcher to play all your games. So this created a certain separation between the core custom firmware and all the extra stuff that would later be useful for Arc 4, because it allows me to have all the extra functionality that is not fully essential stored on the memory stick and only stored on Flash 0, the core most important custom firmware module. This also means the custom firmware is perhaps the most simplistic one when it comes to installing files to Flash 0. It installs exactly 6 files, which is much less than Pro or ME. Okay, so another aspect of the custom firmware that I had to redesign was the loaders. So when I created Arc 4, I had to make it in a way so that existing loaders can be easily adapted to run Arc without having to do any sort of special hackery. So the way I've done it, Arc is pretty much compatible with Infinity, works perfectly. It has a live loader, so it can be loaded as a hen. On PS Vita, it works with the existing pivot bubble loaders that Quick Racer 87 released a few years back. I haven't done really much research on improving existing Vita loaders. I haven't really done much about Vita other than trying to keep compatibility and the custom launcher. And technically it's also compatible with legacy game exploits from way back in the day, back when the beginning of PS Vita scene, we would do these ninja releases in Wololo where we would release game exploit files with the custom firmware included, and you would download the game from PlayStation Network, transfer the save data, and use it to load the custom firmware. Technically, that still works too. So that's like really impressive that it works with all of these different methods and all of these different ways to execute a kernel exploit. It's really abstracted. There's a lot of abstraction layers in a lot of the different aspects of the custom firmware that really allows it to be very modular and work really well. So one of the few things that the custom firmware must have to be able to achieve this goal of working with every PSP model and Vita model, it must be device agnostic. The core system control, Inferno, Popcorn, Stargate, all of these core custom firmware files do not, under any circumstance, do absolutely any check for the device or model they are running on. So they do not care at all if they're running on a Vita, a PSP Go, a Street, a 1K. They do absolutely no check at all. And that the same for device and model. And the same for firmware. It's firmware agnostic to 6.60 and up, including Vita. This is because PS Vita ePSP firmwares are based on 6.60, but they're not exactly 6.60. You can say that the 6.60 line of kernel was updated on the ePSP. So you could say that with every PS Vita firmware update, we also had a 6.60 firmware update, but we only had it for PS Vita, not for PSP. I never understood why Sony didn't bring back all those kernel exploit fixes and all those patches and all those improvements from PS Vita to PSP. I guess they didn't care. Also, another important aspect, there's this thing called compatibility layers. Well, it's like the name implies, is just a custom firmware module that runs just after system control, and it runs transparently. Core custom firmware modules are unaware of this module running, and basically all it does is it adds all the device-specific functionality. On PS Vita, we load a specific compatibility layer. On PSP, we load another one. But like I said, it's completely transparent to the rest of the custom firmware. So system control, Inferno, Popcorn, etc., are completely unaware of the compatibility layer. Also, the usage of custom menus for extra user experience. This was a nice thing that was developed during the ePSP scene. Because we didn't have an XMB, we had to create our own custom launchers, and a lot of them were actually created. I remember there being a lot of competitions, there being a lot of talent involved in creating menus that would improve the user experience on PS Vita when playing PSP games. So I wanted to bring that back onto the PSP scene to give it a fresh new coat of paint, so to speak. So I also created my own custom menu, updated. It has a lot of features that are really, really, really cool. I'll show it later. Okay, so custom firmware files, we have core module, system control, Inferno, driver, Popcorn for custom PS1 games, Stargate for anti-DRM engine, VSH control, which allows for the XMB to show the ISOs and all of that. We have all the extra stuff, compatibility layers, menus, recovery, VSH, launcher, etc. We have, and of course, there's support for plugins and other modules that extend the functionality. I've tried a lot of them and never had any problems. Custom firmware extender, CDDA enabler. Recently, I got Pops Loader version 3 by Team Pro working. The GTA cheat devices, CW cheat, everything I throw at it just works. Some of the more important features of for this version of Arc. Core system for on-site code execution, compatible with every PSP device on 6.60 kernel. And by every PSP device, I mean every PSP device. I've had reports of Arc running on dev units. So, also Inferno Driver version 2, I created this one myself. When adding support for all these new compressed formats, DAX, JSO, CSO version 2, ZSO. I had to rewrite the entire Inferno driver to accommodate for these new formats and also make it much simpler, much more optimized, and better to work with. Okay, so we have the Popcorn controller for custom PS1 games, compatible with Pops Loader version 3. The Stargate No DRM engine. We have plugin support for PSP games, PS1 games, VSH, and also per game plugins, which is a feature that no other custom firmware has. You can literally tell Arc load this plugin only in this specific game. And that is really important for the classic GTA cheat devices because they don't have a check for the game they are running, and they usually cause a lot of errors when they are enabled at the same time or when you run them with different games. So this is actually a pretty good addition. Compatible with all PSP models. I have tested it myself on a 1K, 2K, 3K, Go, and Street. Compatible with all Vita models. I have tested it on 1K, 2K, and TV. Minimalistic and the custom launcher, etc. Okay, so maybe I don't know if you guys want to do the questions or if you want to see a demonstration. I have a PSP right here with me if you want to see it.
Quick. For a question here, is there a way to test it like a beta sort of system?
Beta?
Yeah, so basically, users asking if there's any way that they can help test it for you.
There's a release page on GitHub, and usually I just I have a system that updates the releases every time I do a new commit, and I'm also working on a way to have debug releases that are gonna be interesting. But yeah, I'm pretty active on GitHub and GBA temp. I have a thread there too that it's pretty active, and yeah.
There's also another question from Wouter. How does one run Arc4? I'm assuming.
Okay, so I'm guessing you're asking for PSP. The installation is different on PSP and PS Vita. The base file is the same. You're gonna use the same base files, but the the loading method is different. On PSP, you can use Infinity, but it's pretty simple. You download the zip file and you extract it, and there's two important folders. The most important folder is called arc_01234. That folder is actually a PSP save data, so you copy it to the PSP save data folder, and that's where all the actual Arc files are. You have all the custom menu, you have the flash files, you have everything. And then there's another folder called Arc Live, which is the installer-loader. So you copy that to PSP Game. It's a signed ebook, so it runs on official firmware. You run it, and it will install all the Flash Zero files, and it will boot up Arc. On PS Vita, there's an app that's called Fast Arc that simplifies the process a lot. But basically, what you want to do is you want to download or if you don't have a base PSP game, you need to have a base PSP game from PlayStation Network. I recommend Ape Quest because the demo is free. And once you have a base game or any PSP game from the PlayStation Network will work. And Fast Arc actually allows you to clone them so you don't really lose the original game. And it installs Arc on top of the base game using the pboot trick. And from there on, you can just update the save data file with the newest release.
All right, that sounds good. If you want to go ahead with your demonstration.
Okay. Okay. So how do I? Hey, how are you? Okay. Hold on. Okay. Okay. There we go. Alright, so as you can see, it's running R4 right now. This should be the latest stable release. Well, no, actually, this is a beta version that I'm working on. So if it crashes, I'm not responsible. Alright, so like I said, let's say you started over from the beginning. Okay, so this should be official firmware right now. Yep. I don't know if you can see it. There we go. Okay, so you need two folders. The first one is the save data folder, arc_01234. And you need the arc live loader. So you just run the loader. And there it is. Installs the flash 0 files and it loads up. So from here we have a pretty simplistic VSH menu. I wanted to keep it that way because the idea was to forget all about how previous legacy custom firmware work and try to present a new and fresh way to do things. So, for example, you don't have full CPU control. Like you cannot set the CPU at whatever value you want with the stock firmware. You can use any other plugin and it will work, but the stock firmware only gives you two options. The recovery menu is pretty simple, but it's also a homebrew, so it looks really nice. You have overclock, which sets the CPU speed to 333. Power save sets the speed to 133. And if you want to have more control, you can install plugins like Custom Firmware Extender, and Ultimate VSH menu will also work. You have all the necessary stuff here. Everything you need is here. You don't really need to go through all those tedious advanced menus, configurations that nobody ever touches, and if you touch them, you probably break the firmware. And a good thing about this is that all of these settings do not really affect the core functionality of the custom firmware. So even if you mess up, you don't really cause a brick. Unlike legacy custom firmwares that have the configuration stored on Flash 1, and some of that configuration can actually really mess up the logic of the custom firmware itself and cause really nasty bricks. So basically, the idea is you don't really need to get into advanced configurations. You have everything you need. You can disable, enable at will. You have different options to enable settings at different run levels, at different parts of the system. You have plugin manager, pretty simple one, enable, disable. As you can see, all the plugins are installed in the same file. It doesn't use the same format that classic custom firmware uses. It uses a new format, so it's gonna be a bit of a tedious task at first for users to get used to the new format. But trust me, it's a lot better, and you're gonna like the idea that you can enable plugins only on specific games. So on any other custom firmware, if you enable the LCS and VCS cheat device at the same time, you're gonna get a crash. Here, it will only be enabled on those specific games, so there's more stability. Okay, so that's the recovery menu. I'm gonna show you the custom launcher real quick. Okay, custom launcher. Okay, so this one I created it for mostly for Vita users because, like I said, we don't have an XMB on PS Vita, so we had to create custom launchers and custom menus. The good thing is that it allows us to extend the functionality beyond what the XMB can do. So, and we can still do the same thing as the XMB. So, for example, I have the PMF audio and video decoders and players, so you can see the miniature. This thing works really well. As you can see, it's compatible with different formats. This is a set as well file right now. It has a built-in file browser, and perhaps the best feature of this thing is the FTP server and client. So let me see if I can enable. Okay, so let me enable the PSP, the FTP server on the other PSP. Okay, so here I'm starting the FTP server on the PSP Go. Okay, so as you can see, the FTP server started. So now I'm gonna use the other PSP, go to the FTP client. As you can see, it also uses a lot of the official OS functionality, like for the networking, for the text input. I use all the original Sony functions to provide a more VLF experience, VSH-like feel. But it's not technically a VLF homebrew. Okay, so here we go. So as you can see, the other PSP is replying to the commands, and we can browse the entire memory stick of the other PSP, and we can copy files and folders from one PSP to the other. And yeah, has all the functionality you need. You can browse MS0, EF0 on PSP Go, and the FTP client and server. I've tried it and it works perfectly on PC, on with my phone. I can copy files and and it works really well. So I don't know if there's any other questions.
Questions. There was, can you do a permanent Arc 4 install on the PSP 2000?
You can do it on any of them using Infinity.
All right. And then, are there any new features that you're planning in the near term?
Well, I mean, technically, there's still a few things to fix and improve here and there. PS1 game support on PS Vita is pretty much non-existent. The LEDA plugin doesn't work, and I have absolutely no idea why, because I have implemented and tested the functionality to make it work, but it just doesn't want to work. eLoader does work, so you can use that for Legacy Homebrew. There's also, I don't know if there's any other issue. Well, some of these new formats like DAX and CSO version 2 don't work well, but other newer formats like ZSO and JSO work fantastically. I mean, like really, really, really well. This file right here, you can compare this GDA LCS.ZSO with the equivalent in standard CISO, and it really wipes the floor with the standard, so it runs really, really well. Other than that, I don't know. I wanted to add support for CIPL so that 1K and 2K models can use CIPL, and maybe even Despertar del Cementerio. I have already implemented all the missing M33 functionality, so it's something that's it's in the works. And yeah, there's still a lot of room for improvement. For example, the previous presentation about the SDK, the new SDK generating smaller files and optimizations and stuff like that could be very, very welcome in this project, because I mean, I'm working on a very restricted environment. PSP kernel only has 4 megabytes, and it's already really, really, really tight. So, as a matter of fact, when I added, I believe when I added JSO support, PSP 1K support got broken because kernel ran out of memory. So I had to do a really, really big cleanup to get it to consume half the memory that it was consuming while keeping the same exact functionality. I had to go back to a really old SDK to also have it generate smaller files. So maybe I can use some help there. DAX format, for example, it breaks because it needs more memory than the other formats. So it has a lot of issues there. Other than that, I'm also open to suggestions and stuff like that. So if you request a feature, I can probably see if it can be done.
All right, it seems like there aren't any other questions. Okay, I think that will be the end of this presentation then. And thank you for presenting today.
All right.
All right. Okay, so with that, I think this will be the end of PSP HTC 2022. Go ahead.
No, that was it. That was it's a lot shorter than last year.
As much as a lot shorter it could be. It's still 3.5. It's all over 3.5 hours still. So.
I mean, better than 5.5 hours.
That's true. That's true. All right. Unless anyone has anything else to say, thank you guys for watching the stream today and supporting our developers.